Definitely would have been more honest than
of
Assyria.
course. Oh, yeah.
Bro! Wait, why is he not embarrassed to say that? Bro! Dude, what the fuck? Yo, look at Rabbani's face when he says that. All right, let's get
So
back
first
to
of all,
Mr.
thank you for that
Balotelli.
heated discussion about the present. I would love to go back into history in a way that informs what we can look for in by way of hope for the future. So when has in Israel and Palestine have we been closest to something like a peace settlement, to something that like where both sides would be happy and enable the flourishing of both peoples?
Well, from my knowledge of the 120 years or so of conflict, the closest I think the two sides have been to reaching some sort of settlement appears to have been in the year 2000 when Barack and then subsequently Clinton offered a two-state settlement to PLO Palestinian Authority Chairman Yasser Arafat. And Arafat seemed to waver. He didn't immediately...
This is going to be good because this is like, finally, we're talking about actual facts and not just like a shit-slinging competition, I hope.
Reject what was being offered, but ultimately he came down at the end of Camp David in July 2000. He came down against the proposals, and Clinton, who said he wouldn't blame him, later blamed Arafat for bringing down the summit and not reaching a solution there. But I think they're on the table, certainly in the Clinton parameters of December 2000, which followed the proposals by Barack in July. The Palestinians were offered the best deal they're ever going to get from Israel, unless Israel is destroyed, and then they'll just be a Palestinian Arab state. But the best deal that Israel could ever offer them, they were offered, which essentially was 95% of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, half of the old city of Jerusalem, some sort of joint control of the Temple Mount, and the Gaza Strip, of course, in full. And the Palestinians said no to this deal. And nobody really knows why Arafat said no. That is, some people think he was trying to hold out for...
Nobody knows why he said no? Bro, no, people definitely know why he said no. He very openly said it, too. It's not even... He didn't even say no. That's the other thing. But he did openly state that a major point of contention would be that he would get assassinated.
Or slightly better terms.
But he had no capacity to say no.
But my reading is that he was constitutionally, psychologically incapable of signing off on a two-state deal, meaning acceptance of the existence of a Jewish state. This was really the problem. And,
of Israel or of a Jewish state?
Of a Jewish state, the Jewish state of Israel. He wasn't willing to share Palestine with the Jews and put his name to that. I think he just wouldn't do it. That's my reading. But some people say it was because the terms were insufficient and he was willing, but was waiting for slightly better terms. I don't buy that. I don't think so. But other people disagree with me on this.
He doesn't buy that. No water rights, no states' rights, no standing military. And also Jerusalem is given unconditionally to the state of Israel, a thing that he had no right to say yes to, by the way, which was part of the contention, that it was not within his grounds to say yes to the permanent annexation of Jerusalem, because he said this is a historically and religiously significant land that is far beyond my or your powers of recognizing as belonging to one side. He very famously said that, because I think Bill Clinton tried to sweeten the deal by, Clinton offered him like a nice house overlooking, I think, Al-Aqsa or something. And he was like, it's great. Like, you're offering me a nice house that I will be assassinated in. Like, you're out of your fucking mind. They will kill me.
What do you think?
Well, just briefly in response, Arafat formally recognized Israel in 1993.
Yeah, earlier.
I don't think actually that in 2001 a genuine resolution was on offer, because I think the maximum Israel was prepared to offer, admittedly more than it had been prepared to offer in the past, fell short of the minimum that the Palestinians considered to be a reasonable two-state settlement, bearing in mind that as of 1949, Israel controlled 78% of the British Mandate of Palestine. The Palestinians were seeking a state on the remaining 22%, and this was apparently too much for Israel. My response to your question would be...
Wait, they were being offered something like 22 or 21%.
They were being offered, I think, less then a withdrawal to the 1967 borders with mutual and minor and reciprocal land swaps and the just resolution of
The refugee problem was one of the
question.
problems.
Yes. I worked for no.
The refugee problem is part of the question, is a great way to frame it. And let me tell you, okay, the refugee problem is only a fucking problem if you have an interest in maintaining a demographic majority Jewish ethno-state. Like, you're framing it in the most insane way possible.
Number of years with International Crisis Group, and my boss at the time was Rob Malley, who was one of the American officials present at Camp
recently
David.
thrown out of the State Department, whatever.
The point I want to make about Rob was he wrote, I think, a very perceptive article in 2001 in the New York Review of Books. I know that you and Ehud Barak have had it.
Rabbani does a phenomenal job throughout this entire process. I feel bad that I'm like covering his face a little bit here because for obvious reasons. For those of you who don't know, if you weren't here yesterday, I'm covering it because like while there are 3 individuals who are relatively knowledgeable, even though they have obviously ideological disagreements, and maybe sometimes Benny Morris can be like a historical from time to time, there's a 4th person involved in this, an iPad kid, if you will, that is banned from this platform for very good reasons. And therefore, I am trying to do my very best to make sure that I am not like engaging in ban evasion, a terms of service violation, considering that he's not the focal point of this conversation in any meaningful capacity. And this is more so a 5-hour debate on a ongoing geopolitical conflict that is very important to my commentary and everything I talk about. I think it's like valid to watch it, but I'm also doing my very best to ensure that, you know, I'm trying to, not engage in ban evasion.
To debate with him, but I think he gives a very compelling reason of why and how Camp David failed. But rather than going into that,
he wrote that together with Hussein Ara.
Hussein Ara, yes, who was not at Camp David.
Yes.
But in response to your question, I think there could have been a real possibility of Israeli-Palestinian and Arab-Israeli peace in the mid-1970s, in the wake of the 1973.
I love hearing from a guy who just doesn't know anything about Twitch streaming against a guy who's been Twitch streaming professionally for 6 years. Thank you, Sussy Chris. Everything you just said is the exact opposite. For the record, it's stupid. The rules are stupid. But everything you said is the exact opposite in terms of ban evasion. That would be direct ban evasion under Twitch terms of service. Also, thank you for recognizing. All right.
October War. I'll recall that in 1971, Moshe Dayan, Israel's defense minister at the time, full of triumphalism about Israel's victory in 1967, speaking to a group of Israeli military veterans, stated, if I had to choose between Sharm el-Sheikh without peace or peace without Sharm el-Sheikh, this is referring to the resort in Egyptian Sinai, which was then under Israeli occupation, Dayan said, I will choose for Sharm el-Sheikh without peace. Then the 1973 war came along, and I think Israeli calculations began to change very significantly. And I think it was in that context that had there been a joint U.S.-Soviet push for an Arab-Israeli and Israeli-Palestinian resolution that incorporated both an Israeli withdrawal to the 1967 lines and the establishment of a Palestinian state in the occupied territories, I think there was a very reasonable prospect for that being achieved. It ended up being aborted, I think, for several reasons. And ultimately, the Egyptian president, Anwar Sadat, decided, for reasons we can discuss later, to launch a separate unilateral initiative for Israeli-Egyptian rather than Arab-Israeli peace. And I think once that set in motion, the prospects disappeared because Israel essentially saw its most powerful adversary removed from the equation and felt that this would give it a free hand in the occupied territories, also in Lebanon, to get rid of the PLO and so on. So, and you ask when were we closest? And I can't give you an answer of when we were closest. I can only tell you when I think we could have been close, and that was a lost opportunity. If we look at the situation today, there's been a lot of discussion about a two-state settlement. My own view, and I've written about this, I don't I don't buy the arguments of the naysayers that we have passed the so-called point of no return with respect to a two-state settlement. Certainly, if you look at the Israeli position in the occupied territories, I would argue it's more tenuous than was the French position in Algeria in 1954, than was a British position in Ireland in 1916, than was the Ethiopian position in Eritrea in 1990. And so, as a matter of practicality, as a matter of principle, I do think the establishment of a Palestinian state in the occupied territories remains realistic. I think the question that we now need to ask ourselves, it's one I'm certainly asking myself since October 7th, and looking at Israel's genocidal campaign, but also looking at larger questions. Is it desirable? Can you have peace with what increasingly appears to be an irrational, genocidal state that seeks to confront and resolve each and every political challenge with violence, and that reacts to its failure to achieve solutions to political challenges with violence by applying even more violence, that has an insatiable lust for Palestinian territory, that a genocidal apartheid state that seems increasingly incapable of even conceiving of peaceful coexistence with the other people on that land. So I'm very pessimistic that a solution is possible. I look at, I grew up in Western Europe in the long shadow of the Second World War. I think we can all agree that there could have been no peace in Europe had certain regimes on that continent not been removed from power. I look at Southeast Asia in the late 1970s, and I think we're all agreed that there could not have been peace in that region had the Khmer Rouge not been ousted. I look at Southern Africa during the 1990s, and I think we can all be agreed that had the white minority regimes of that ruled Zimbabwe and South Africa not been dismantled, there could not have been peace in that region. And although I think it's worth having a discussion, I do think it's now a legitimate question to ask, can there be peace without dismantling the Zionist regime? And I make a very clear distinction between the Israeli state and its institutions on the one hand, and the Israeli people, who I think, regardless of our discussion about the history, I think you can now talk about an Israeli people and a people that have developed rights over time, and a formula for peaceful coexistence with them will need to be found, which is a separate matter from dismantling the Israeli state and its institutions. And again, I haven't reached clear conclusions about this, except to say, as a practical matter, I think a two-state settlement remains feasible. But I think there are very legitimate questions about its desirability and about whether peace can be achieved in the Middle East with the persistence of an irrational, genocidal apartheid regime, particularly because Israeli society.
Rabbani's so fucking good, dude. He's so brilliant. He is so brilliant. Yeah, it is a very well formulated and well informed answer. Like incredible. I don't know what else to say other than no notes. Incredible.
Is beginning to develop.
I'll say this much. I get exactly why Norm wanted him to be a part of this. He is like almost a perfect counterweight to Norm in many respects. Like obviously they're both correct, but their styles are very different. And he's brilliant.
Many extremely distasteful, supremacist, dehumanizing aspects that I think also stand in the way of coexistence that are being fed by this regime.
So if you look back into history, when we're closest to peace, and do you draw any hope from any of them?
I feel like in 2000, I feel like the deal that was present, at least at the end of the Taba summit, I think in terms of what Israel, I think, had the appetite to give and what the Palestinians would have gotten, would have definitely been the most agreeable between the two parties. I don't know if in 73, I'm not sure if the appetite would have ever been there for the Arab states to negotiate alongside the Palestinians. I know that in Jordan, there was no love for the Palestinians after 1970, after Black September. I know that Sadat had no love for the Palestinians due to their association with the Muslim Brotherhoods, attempted assassinations in Egypt.
Sorry, which? PLO and the Muslim Brotherhood?
Sadat was upset because there were attempted assassinations by people an assassination. It was a personal friend of his, Yusuf al-Sibai, I can't pronounce that. He was assassinated in Cyprus by a Palestinian.
He was killed by the Abu Nidal organization.
Sure, yeah. Admittedly, yeah, he says belongs to a group, not PLO directly, but I think that there was a history of the Palestinians sometimes fighting with their neighboring states that were hosting them if they weren't getting the political concessions they wanted. The assassination of the Jordanian king in 50.
That's crazy.
One might be another example of that in Jordan. It feels like over a long period of time, it feels like the Palestinians have been kind of told from the neighboring Arab states that if they just continue to enact violence, whether in Israel or abroad, that eventually a state will materialize somehow. I don't think it's gotten them any closer to a state. If anything, I think it's taken them farther and farther and farther away from one. And I think as long as the hyperbolic language is continually employed internationally, the idea that Israel is committing a genocide, the idea that there is an apartheid, the idea.
Oh, I didn't realize it was actually not like Israel's genocidal actions that are moving everyone away from peace, but it's actually the hyperbolic language being applied. Damn, dude. Excuse me. I didn't realize the Palestinians and everyone else, I mean, fuck their lives and their worldview and their deaths. It's actually other people correctly saying, it's the Human Rights Watch that in 2021 said Israel is an apartheid state. That is actually the reason why we will never achieve peace now. It wasn't like actually having an apartheid state. It was people saying this apartheid state is an apartheid state. Damn, dude. Omni-liberalism on top, baby. In 2022, sorry, Amnesty International, not 2021.
That they live in a concentration camp. All of these words, I think, further the narrative for the Palestinians that Israel is an evil state that needs to be dismantled. I mean, you said as much about the institution, at least, of the Zionist government. Israel's government is probably not going anywhere. All of the other surrounding Arab states have accepted that, or at least most of them down in the Gulf, Egypt and Jordan, have accepted that. The Palestinians need to accept it too. The Israeli state or the state apparatus is not going anywhere. And at some point, they need to realize, like, hey, we need a leader that's going to come out and represent us, represent all of us, is willing to take political risks, is willing to negotiate some lasting peace for us. And it's not going to be the international community or some invocation of international law or some invocation of morality or justice that's going to extricate us from this conflict. It's going to take some actual difficult political maneuvering on the ground.
Of accepting Israel.
Of accepting Israel,
which they formally did in 1993.
Which they formally did in 1993, yeah, but then no lasting peace came after that.
I think they first recognized it in 1973 and formally accepted it in 1993. So whose fault is that? I reckon. Perhaps there was some other shit that happened in 1993.
2000.
Huh. It's so crazy that one historical reference, like one historical fact that he did not cherry pick from his fucking Wikipedia argument, immediately just destroys everything that the foundational basis of what he was presenting.
No, because 1993 was not a peace agreement.
Sure, the Oslo Accords didn't have a final solution.
Were an interim agreement, and Palestinians actually began clamoring for commencing the permanent status resolutions on schedule, and the Israelis kept delaying them. In fact, they only began, I believe, in '99. Under American pressure on the Israelis. And
I think you're being a bit one-sided. Both sides didn't fulfill the promise of Oslo and the steps needed for Oslo. There was Palestinian terrorism, which accompanied Israel's expansion of settlements and other things. The two things fed each other and led to what happened in 2000, which was a breakdown of the talks.
Did you just say they're Jewish, you guys? They can use the term final solution? The guy who used the term final solution is not Jewish. Destiny's not Jewish, bro. What? And also, what do you mean? You got to be joking, right? To be fair, I was being charitable and I assumed that he wasn't like cynically fucking using that term to invoke Holocaust memes in an otherwise serious conversation. And Rabbani isn't Jewish either. I think that he just fucking said it as like no permanent solution instead of and then accidentally said final.
Together when the
It's like a totally ignorable. Like I ignored it because it's irrelevant.
Palestinians said no. But I think there's I don't agree incidentally with this definition of Israel or the Israeli state as apartheid. It's not. There is some sort of apartheid going on in the West Bank. The Israeli regime itself is not an apartheid regime. This is nonsense by any definition of apartheid. Which
by the formal definition, I think it qualifies.
No, it doesn't qualify. Apartheid is a race-based distinction between different segments of the population, and some of them don't have any representation at all, like the blacks in South Africa.
But that's
no
not
rights at all. In Israel itself, the minority, the Arabs, do have representation, do have rights, and so on. I don't think Israel is also genocidal. I don't think it's been genocidal. It wasn't so in 48. It wasn't so in 67, and it hasn't been recently, in my view. And talk about dismantling Israel, and that's what you're talking about, is, I think Stephen said it correctly, is counterproductive. It just pushes Israelis further away from willing to give Palestinians anything.
I love Zionists, no matter how light in their support, no matter how heavy-handed in their support, the conversation always starts with straight up genocide denial. And then the conversation always ends with, well, you're saying that I'm doing genocide denial, which is making it really hard for me to come to terms with your assessment. It's like, dude, considering that you wrote the book on the ethnic displacement of Palestinians and then literally arrived at the conclusion that it's like good, actually. It's for a higher cause. It's an objectively good thing that this happened. It had to happen. It was inevitable. Like, it's ridiculous to fucking let that hang there and then continue to have a conversation with you as though you're actually making an honest moral assessment here that is morally righteous. It's not. Defending fascism from a liberal framework is always going to run into this ideological crossroad. Who followed this racist on my account? That's so funny. Please don't ban this guy. I love this guy. This is exactly the type of shit I'm on. He called me a racist. Watching Destiny live search Wikipedia is a surreal experience. Yeah, I saw that. It's pretty funny. Listen, bro. Look, he's got to bring something to the table, okay? Quick fingers.
Please, Norm, tell me you have
something optimistic to say.
No, even though I agree, I've thought about it a lot, and I agree with Muin's analysis. I'm not really in the business of punditry. I rather look at the historical record where I feel more comfortable and I feel on terra firma. So I'd like to just go through that. I agree and I disagree with Muin on the 73 issue. After the 1973 war, it was clear that Israel was surprised by what happened during the war, and it took a big hit. The estimates are, I don't know what numbers you use, but I hear between 2,000 and 3,000 Israeli soldiers were killed during the 1970s.
It was 2,500?
Yeah, 2,700.
Yeah, okay, so I got it right.
Yeah.
I read different numbers. That's, it's a very large number of Israelis who were killed. There were moments at the beginning of the war where there was a fear that this might be it.
There wasn't.
No,
this is nonsense. Everybody forgets Israel's atomic weaponry.
I know, but
so how could they have been defeated?
Didn't Diane talk about the collapse of the third temple?
He did,
yeah.
but it was hysterical and silly
because
Israel had atomic weapons. They wanted to stop the Syrians or the Egyptians.
But we're talking about perceptions.
Yeah,
here.
I'm not. I can't tell you if he was hysterical or not.
No, he was. For a day, he was
in the same room with him.
For a day, he was
hysterical. But I'm just saying, let's not bog down on that.
Wait, I thought the family atomics was not real. What happened? What happened? Does the atomics exist, or does the family atomics not exist in Israel? Interesting. Interesting. It's like the top of the hour ad break. In the minds and souls and hearts of those who are subscribed, they don't see it, so they don't think it's real. But for everybody else who is unsubscribed, well, they certainly see it, and it's a very real thing for them. Of course, if you want to think that the top of the hour ad break is mystical, and not real, just subscribe for $5 or for free. Here's the streaming ad break now for those of you who do not.
The war is over, and when President Carter comes into power, Carter was an extremely smart guy, Jimmy Carter, extremely smart guy, and he was very fixed on details. He was probably the most impressive of modern American presidents, in my opinion, by a wide margin. And he was determined to resolve the conflict on a big scale, on the Arab-Israeli scale. On the Palestinian issue, he wouldn't go past what he called the Palestinian homeland. He wouldn't
Palestinian national home.
And the Palestinian national home. He wouldn't go as far as a Palestinian state. I'm not going to go into the details of that. I don't think realistically, given the political balance of forces, that was going to happen, but that's a separate issue. Let's get to the issue at hand, namely, what is the obstacle, or what has been the obstacle since the early 1970s? Since roughly 1974, the Palestinians have accepted the two-state settlement on the June 1967 border. Now, as more pressure was exerted on Israel, because the Palestinians seemed reasonable, the Israelis, to quote the Israeli political scientist Avner Yaniv, he since passed from the scene, he said, Yaniv in his book, Dilemmas of Security, he said that the big Israeli fear was what he called the Palestinian peace offensive. That was their worry, that the Palestinians were becoming too moderate. And unless you understand that, you can't understand the June 1982 Lebanon War. The purpose of the June 1982 Lebanon War was to liquidate the PLO in southern Lebanon because they were too moderate, the Palestinian peace offensive. I'm going to have to fast forward. There are many events. There's the First Intifada, then there's the Oslo Accord, and let's now go to the heart of the issue, namely the 2000-2001 negotiations. Well, the negotiations are divided into three parts for the sake of listeners.
What he just said is really important for people to understand. With respect to Israel's fears of the Palestinian liberation organizations becoming much more palatable to the Western world. This was always a very real fear, because deep down inside, everybody kind of recognizes that the Palestinians do have a right to that land. It's like if the indigenous populations weren't full-blown, cast aside, genocided, and could literally communicate with the rest of the world that, like, holy shit, these guys are killing us, and we just want the killing to end. We want the oppression to end. It's important to recognize this because the destruction of the peace process from the Israeli side, which Netanyahu literally openly championed and ran on, by the way, played the role of making or legitimizing the reactionary, more fundamentalist, more reactionary forces within Palestinian society that were developing prominence, like Hamas. The only mechanism of pushback against the Israeli state that consistently utilized the two-state solution and the peace process, the so-called peace process, as a way to quietly and sometimes very publicly and openly continue permanently annexing land, continue creating Bantustans, ghettos in the occupied West Bank through settler expansion. that is a very that's why Israel's way more comfortable with Hamas being the only entity that defends the interests of the Palestinians. Benjamin Netanyahu has openly admitted this as well. He has openly stated this, both in closed-door meetings, openly to members of the Knesset, saying that we can always control Hamas in the way that we know how to. We control how high the flames go, in referencing Gaza. Israel never wanted a real partner in peace. This is why it is fraudulent when people suggest this false narrative. It is obviously ahistorical. It is obviously not only ahistorical, but it's also, I think, impossible to contend with if you know anything about the situation. If you want to prevent the creation of a Palestinian state, we must support Hamas, and that includes financially. This is our strategy. Benjamin Netanyahu said it, I believe, 2017.
There's Camp David in July 2000. There are the Clinton parameters in December 2000. And then there are negotiations in Taba in Egypt, in 2001. Those are the three phases. Now, I have studied the record probably.
How do you speak even slower? I love when Mr. Bonarelli's fans come in to this community. I love when Mr. Bonarelli's fans come in here. Wait, what? His family literally owns slaves on Megalaw? This guy also seemingly hates Mr. Bonarelli. Mr. Ravioli. I'm going to unban this guy. He's funny. All right, let's continue.
Lead to the point of insanity because there are so many.
My favorite type of criticism is literally people being like, I think you made a point. I didn't personally understand it, so you must not have made a point. Where is your shame, sir? There used to be a dignified role that interlocutors played, where they had a sense of decency and humility to at least act like they understood a prescient point.
Details you have to master.
I'll vouch for that. The insanity
Yeah,
part, yeah.
I will vouch for it. I will personally vouch for it. There is one extensive record from that whole period from 2000 to, you could say, 2007. And that is what came to be called the Palestine Papers, which are about 15,000 pages of all the records of the negotiations. I have read through all of them, every single page. And this is what I find. If you look at Shlomo Ben Ami's book, which I have with me, Prophets Without Honor, it's his last book. He says, going into Camp David, that means July, going into Camp David, July 2000, he said the Israelis were willing to return not return, but will withdraw relinquish 92% of the West Bank.
Ben Ami was at Camp David.
Yeah, he was at Taba. He was also at Camp David. Israel wanted to keep all the major settlement blocks. It wanted to keep roughly 8% of the West Bank. They were allowing for, you put it at 84 to 90% in your books. They put it at roughly 92%. Israel was willing to give up.
Depends how you calculate.
Yeah,
It also depends what stage at Camp David, because there were 2 weeks.
I'll get to that.
Proposals changed during
So
those 2 weeks.
Israel wants to keep all the major settlement blocks.
Means the border area of the West
Well,
Bank.
not the border. We have Ariel. We have Male Adumim. We have, as Condoleezza Rice called Ariel, she said it was a dagger into the heart of the West Bank. So they want to keep 8% of the land. They want to keep the settlement.
All the borders Fun fact, Israel has never suggested that there wouldn't be a permanent military occupation amongst the Jordan boundary. Like, there was never a moment where the Palestinians would actually have full control over their own border with Jordan. Like, that's a non-starter. Now tell me how that's a decent proposal. They were like, yeah, you can have your state. No standing military, by the way. But also no border, really. And yes, not only do you not have a border, because like people will use the percentages to make it seem like Israel was actually suggesting like a decent proposal when it was not the case, because it cut through the West Bank and there were no borders. It was basically a Bantustan.
Blocks. They want to keep 80% of the settlers. They will not budge an inch on the question of refugees. To quote Ehud Barak in the article he co-authored with you in the New York Review of Books,
Bro,
we will accept, and I think the quote's accurate, no moral.
It's so funny. Like, they are cooking this dude so goddamn hard on the timeline, dude. I don't understand how. I mean, I guess this is a perfect demonstration of like being hoisted on your own petard. Like, the very same confidence that deluded Destiny for many years into thinking that he was this like brilliant debater, devoid of actual like analysis, devoid of any of the historical facts or whatever. I think, and the fact that he was able to genuinely like bully a lot of people and humiliate them, and you know, develop a fan base, because he does debate a lot of fucking idiots, like, you know, the red pill guys and whatnot, and developing a fan base that's like, you are the fucking champion, like you are the intellectual champion, akin to Ben Shapiro, had caused him to unironically think that he can just do this against people who wrote the books that Wikipedia is summarizing. The thing that sucks with Norman Finkelstein is that I don't think we'll ever see a guy that's even somewhat similar to him ever again. Once he's gone, that's it. I mean, he's definitely right. He's so correct about this. Yeah. There is no one who is as like, there's just no one who is that autistic, honestly. And also simultaneously, yeah, that's it. Like, I've never encountered someone. People like that usually are in the fucking STEM field. You know what I mean? He has STEM Lord brain, and he has dedicated it entirely to fucking history. Remember, this is a guy who literally refuses to use computers, refuses to use phones, dude. Bro, he challenged a motherfucker to an argument, but in print. Exactly. That's why he brought books. But also, he's like very, like, he's I don't know how to describe it. He's like very interesting as a figure. Like, beyond just his dedication to like a complete retelling, a complete and accurate retelling of events. Yeah, no, he is a Norm Finkelstein personally did Butlerian jihad on his own. I've met many of these types in the humanities. They tend to be second chair in their faculty in a university/college. Norm Finkelstein read a book he hates 3 times just to make sure he has the facts straight so we can shit on the people on this one very specific topic. It is some of the most petty shit ever. Thankfully, it's on the right side of history and on behalf of an oppressed people. Yeah. What do you mean he doesn't use computers? Bro, you heard what I said. He does not have a cell phone, brother. Norm Finkelstein does not have a fucking cell phone. He has a landline in his house. When my friend Brace went to his house to interview him, the landline kept going off. He had to take it out. Yeah, he called the iPad in front of him that the iPad kid is using a machine. Like, he's looking at it like a prehistoric figure. Like, that is literally, you know what that's like? That's like going to one of these like indigenous tribes that has previously not been encountered by man and showing them the iPad. They would have the same approach. They would be like, what is that? If they could communicate.
Legal or historical responsibility for what happened to the refugees. So forget about even allowing refugees to return. We accept no moral, legal, or historical responsibility for the refugees. And on Jerusalem, they wanted to keep large parts of Jerusalem. Now, how do we judge who is reasonable and who is not? Ben Ami says, I think the Israeli offer was reasonable. That's how he sees it. But what is the standard of reasonable? My standard is, what does international law say? International law says the settlements are illegal. Israel wants to keep all the settlement blocks. 15 judges, all 15, in the Wool decision in 2004, in July 2004, all 15 judges, including the American judge Bergenthal, ruled the settlements are illegal under international law. They want to keep 80% of the settlers. Under international law, all the settlers are illegal in the West Bank. They want to keep large parts of East Jerusalem. But under international law, East Jerusalem is occupied Palestinian territory. That's what the international...
No, not Palestinian, because there was no Palestine.
Okay.
There's never been a Palestinian state. How could it be Palestinian?
I listened patiently to you.
Told you. Listen, he's the goat. I'm the giraffe. I listen. I read these people. I listen to these people. That's it. That's a key detail that they will never fucking reckon with. Because Mr. Morelli does not care about the facts of the matter because he did not read the appropriate Wikipedia page.
Sorry. Under international law, if you read the decision, all territory, the 2004 Wall decision, all territory beyond the Green Line, which includes East Jerusalem, is occupied Palestinian territory.
Yep. The Golan Heights.
The designated unit, according to the International Court of Justice, the designated unit for Palestinian self-determination. And they deny any right whatsoever on the right of return. The maximum, I don't want to go into the details now, the maximum formal offer was by Ehud Olmert in 2008. He offered 5,000 refugees could return under what was called family reunification, 5,000 in the course of 5 years, and no recognition of any Israeli responsibility. So, if you use as the baseline what the UN General Assembly has said and what the International Court of Justice has said, if you use that baseline, international law, by that baseline, all the concessions came from the Palestinian side. Every single concession came from the Palestinian side. None came from the Israeli side. They may have accepted less than what they wanted, but it was still beyond what international law allocated to them. Now, you'll say...
Allocated to the Palestinians.
Allocated to the Palestinians, yes. Thank you for the clarification. Now, about Arafat. Like the Mufti, never liked the guy. I think that was one of the only disagreements Mouin and I had when Arafat passed. You were a little sentimental, I was not. Never liked the guy. But politics, you don't have to like the guy. There was no question, nobody argues it, that whenever the negotiations started up, the Palestinians just kept saying the same things.
No.
No.
They kept saying no.
No. Professor Morris, with due respect, incorrect. They kept saying international legitimacy, international law, UN resolutions. They said, we already gave you what the law required. We gave that in 1988, November 1988, and then ratified again at Oslo in 1993. And they said, now we want what was promised us under international law. And that was the one point where everybody on the other side agreed. Clinton, don't talk to me about international law. Livni, during the Omar administration, she said, I studied international law. I don't believe in international law. Every single member on the other side, they didn't want to hear from international law. And to my thinking, that is the only reasonable baseline for trying to resolve the conflict. And Israel has, along with
But
the US...
when has international law been relevant to any conflict basically in the world?
Hey, that's why
over the last 150
That's why the
years.
Palestinians have to recognize Israel, because that's international law.
But international law is meaningless.
That was UN Resolution
Conflicts are not
242.
solved by international law or in accordance with international
Yeah,
law.
but then, Professor Morris, for argument's sake, let's agree on that, strictly for argument's sake. What's the alternative? Dennis Ross said, we're going to decide who gets what on the basis of need.
I like that he recognized that. No, he's saying might is right. He's saying might is right. Because if international law doesn't exist, because no one follows it, because of selective enforcement, the only time international law ever is like even talked about is when America is using it as a righteous, just cause to go and like invade a country or whatever. And Israel only talks about it when they are using it as a righteous cause to go and blow up fucking Palestinians. Then what is to be done? What remains? Well, what remains is obvious. Might is right. Another fundamental principle of Zionism.
Needs. So he says, Israel needs this, Israel needs that, Israel needs that. Dennis Ross decided to be the philosopher king. He's going to decide on the basis of need.
That's not what he's saying. That's what you are saying for sure. Wait, what? He literally said international law has never been used in any of the past 100 years of conflict, which is not even true. They did literally talk about Bosnia earlier, so suck my dick. And secondly, that is exactly what he said. He said, international law has never been used. Cope? I'm not the one engaging in copium, brother. Your boy got his shit pushed in so fucking hard by like a 900-year-old demon who doesn't even fucking use a cell phone that you have to come in here and literally argue on behalf of your daddy, okay? And argue on behalf of your daddy failing to fucking even present a reasonable argument in defense of a genocidal apartheid regime. Oof. Oof. Couldn't read his own book. What? Couldn't read his own book? The fuck are you talking about? Dude. This is what happens when like a fucking mentat who is basically the human version of Wikipedia on this conflict meets a dude who just browses Wikipedia to create post hoc rationalizations for arguments that are devoid of like really important fundamental facts, establishing principles. Like, this is what happens. You went up against a dude who is the Wikipedia. This is the Wikipedia that he has. And you want to know how it was such a fucking evisceration, like such a ruthless takedown? It's not even like the Twitter people chirping and saying, lol, it's so funny. He called him a Mr. Borelli, Mr. Bonarelli, whatever. That stuff is fun. But you know he got fucking his shit pushed in because one, he didn't even fucking watch the footage himself, didn't want his audience to see it. Quickly, two, moved on to try to get me banned for watching it from Twitch. And last but not least, he's been coping the fucking replies nonstop. And one of his funniest copes has been, well, he was just quoting stuff too much. That's it. You have conceded. You have been bested in the marketplace of ideas when your only takedown is basically going, yeah, sorry, I didn't know he had hands like that, intellectually speaking. You know what I mean? Like, you just literally did that. You mentally said, well, this is unfair. He has hands. I didn't know he had hands like that. I did not think that he could do that. He cheated by quoting people, some of which were in the room themselves. That's messed up, man.
Well, if you asked me, since Gaza is one of the densest places on earth, it needs a
Tel
good
Aviv.
yes,
It needs part of Sinai.
It needs
That's
a
what
nice
Gaza-
big chunk
of Sinai.
Well, not Sinai.
That's what it actually needs.
Okay, I don't even want to go there. It needs a nice big
Bro said Sinai. Dude, God, I love the Israeli mind. Like, the Zionist Israeli mind has only one speed. I swear to God. He was so quick. Sinai. Like, I know he's got to be joking.
Sinai.
well, not
He's got to be joking, right? He's not literally like, yeah, Landbridge. Where? Another country. Don't worry, Norm. We got this. We'll just go back and reoccupy it. No, he said Sinai, not cyanide. He's saying, don't worry, we'll connect the land bridge between Gaza and the West Bank by retaking parts of Egypt. That is an insane thing to say, but it's also like, yeah, they got the Lebensraum mindset, dude. Straight up. He's like, dude, I don't understand. Just we'll make living space. Yeah, no, here, we'll push you into the desert. Don't worry. Someone else's desert, we'll take it and we'll give it to you. One speed, bro. One fucking speed.
That's what it actually needs.
Okay, I don't even want to go there. It needs a nice big chunk, but I have to accept international law says no. Okay,
International law is irrelevant.
Now Ben Ami says, I think the Israeli offer was reasonable. Okay, that's
And he's a reasonable guy.
That's he
You
seems
know
it,
that.
even though okay, I don't want to go there. I've debated him, and partly agree with you. But who decides what's reasonable? I think the international community, in its political incarnation, the General Assembly, the Security Council, all those UN Security Council resolutions saying the settlements are illegal, annexation of East Jerusalem is null and void, and the International Court of Justice. That, to me, is a reasonable standard. And by that standard, the Palestinians were asked to make concessions.
It is pretty funny that his argument devolves into, Benny Morse's argument devolves into routinely, by the way, no matter how much that other chatter was coping in here, being like, cope and seethe, I'm not coping, you're coping. His argument literally is international law is irrelevant. Okay, what's relevant then? Might is right. And he said it multiple times. He was like, Malt, you're coping.
Which I consider unreasonable, or the international community considers unreasonable.
I think that the issue is when you apply international law or international standards, I wouldn't say what Benny Moore says that they're irrelevant, but I think that these have to be seen as informing the conversation. I don't think these are the final shape of the conversation. I don't think historically Israel has ever negotiated within the strict bounds of whether we're talking Resolution 242, whether we're talking about any General Assembly resolutions. That's just not how these negotiations tend to go. You might consider international opinion on things, but at the end of the day, it's the bilateral negotiations, oftentimes historically started in secret, independent of the international community, that end up shaping what the final agreements look like. I think the issue with this broad appeal to international law is, again, going back to my earlier point about all of the euphemistic words, all it simply does is drive Palestinian expectations up to a level that is never going to be satisfied. For instance, you can throw that ICJ.
Dude, the world is doing a really bad disservice to the Palestinians by telling them that they're full-blown human beings that deserve autonomy and emancipation. Okay? Israel, which is a naturally occurring phenomena, okay, like a typhoon or an earthquake or, I don't know, like a volcano, is always going to keep oppressing them. And it's really fucked up that the world is seemingly recognizing the humanity of these fucking Arab barbarian marauder rapists and basically serving them a sloppy steak, just a reality that'll never occur. It's like, are there no humans on the other side of this equation? Are the Israelis not human beings? Is this an act of God? Mr. Bernardo, is Israel an act of God? How can you sit here in the most imbecilic manner, bring up these assertions devoid of factual basis? You fantastic imbecilic human.
opinion all you want. It was an advisory opinion. That came in 2004. Have Palestinians gained more or less land since that 2004 advisory opinion was issued?
So what would your standard be then?
Both sides have to have a delegation that confronts each other, and they assess the realistic conditions on the ground, and they try to figure out within the confines of international.
Wait, so okay, so then throw the entire peace process away because you're saying that that's not what happened. That is not a good argument for you, my friend, if you want to present it as Israel has done its very best. Because if you ask Benny, who's looking at you right now like, the fuck? That's what he thinks, or I don't even know if he believes that. But like, that literally is the argument that Israel presents, is like, oh, we went to the table, we had concessions ready to go, those concessions were reasonable, you just fucking destroyed. This is a pro-Palestinian position. Destiny, I think, maybe got like a little too horny or something. Maybe he's like a little fucked up here. Maybe Norm got into his head a little bit, but is like low-key making an argument that every Palestinian knows is the reality, which is that the peace process has never been realistic because of obviously a lack of serious concessions from Israel, but also because of the fact that Israel has never really looked at the situation on the ground.
Actually, the both sides are reasonable for. But like, for instance, this statement of like full retreat from the West Bank, was it 400,000 settlers? How many settlers live in the West Bank now?
Probably 500,000.
Yeah, you're going to
750,000 settlers in the West Bank. You should fucking know this. It's like been 5 months since you learned where Israel is on a map after first saying that, they deserve to be genocided, the Palestinians, I mean. It is also definitely on the Wikipedia page. Benny is going to say it's 750 total, 250,000 in East Jerusalem, which Benny doesn't believe belongs to Palestine because he's a piece of shit. And then the rest of it is just West Bank proper, beyond the borders or beyond the boundary of occupied Jerusalem. Of course, like I said, I mean, Mr. Balotelli, you should know these facts, but Benny Morris does know these facts, and he's a fucking demon regardless.
If you include the Jerusalem suburbs.
Yeah, 400,000 or 500,000 people. I've never...
With the Jerusalem suburbs, perhaps.
Yeah,
Israel calls that...
Damn, that's crazy. Dude, remember when this fucking piece of shit donkey, this donkey fucking asshole, was claiming that I want to kill Israeli children, Israeli babies, settler babies, or saying that my assessment is unrealistic when I was saying, because of the fact that there are 750,000 Israeli settlers right now, Jewish settlers in the West Bank and also in East Jerusalem, it would be impossible to dispel or to expel every single person there. It would literally be a mass catastrophe, okay? This is precisely the reason why I believe and am committed to a one-state solution. Just saying that, like, that was my assessment of the situation, and yet his fucking asshat community literally took what I said and flipped it on its head and kept saying, oh my God, like, he just wants to kill Israeli babies. He wants to kill Israeli babies. And that a two-state solution is maybe viable in the future, but also Palestinians are not being genocided, and also Israel's not an apartheid state, even though all of those are correct. The Palestinians are being genocided. Israel is an apartheid state.
A million people
Jerusalem, not settlements.
I know that, but that's not what the law calls it null and void.
We can say whatever we want until we're blue in the face, but like there's half a million Israeli people are not being expelled.
My response, you're basically saying, if I understand correctly, there's only one way to resolve this, and that is through direct bilateral negotiation.
Probably, yeah.
Okay. So,
or ideally, but
I've taken over your house. Okay. You're not going to go to the police because, you know, the law is of limited value. So you come over and sit in what is now my living room that used to be your living room, and we negotiate. The problem there is that you're not going to get anything unless I agree to it. And standards and norms and law and all the rest of it be damned. So you need to take into account that when you're advocating bilateral negotiations, that effectively that gives each of the parties veto power. And in the current circumstances, the Palestinians have already recognized Israel. They have.
Wait, you keep bringing that up like it's a significant
It's not
concession,
true.
and even if
it's not even true.
It doesn't. But it doesn't. The recognition from Palestine isn't doing anything for.
Hamas totally rejects.
I'm not talking about
Hamas is the majority among the Palestinian people. They won the elections in 2006.
They won the majority of the seats.
Yes, exactly.
They didn't win the majority
every
of votes.
opinion poll today says the majority of Palestinians support the Hamas.
That sounds right.
Hamas absolutely rejects Israel. So if Arafat in 1993 or whatever issued a sort of recognition of Israel,
a sort of recognition.
Okay, a recognition of Israel, it's meaningless. It's meaningless.
It's meaningless.
Anyhow, I don't believe that Arafat was sincere about it.
Does it matter what you or I think?
Well,
about
most
what
Israelis do, and that does matter.
Okay,
that does matter. But Hamas says no, and Hamas is the majority.
So for years, for years, the Israeli and U.S. demand was that the Palestinians recognize 242 and 338. They did, but you're saying, okay, we demanded that they do this, but it was meaningless when they did it. Then the demand was that
a tactical thing. Yes.
Then the demand was that the PLO recognize Israel.
Tactical.
Okay, we demanded that they did this, and they did it, but it's meaningless.
And they never changed their charter, the PLO. You may remember that.
In fact,
they supposedly abrogated the old charter, but never came up with a new one.
No,
so there's no new charter.
But in 1996,
and Farouk Kaddoumi said, of course, the old charter is still in force.
Yes, but the point is, the Palestinians' demands are constantly made of them. And when they accede to those demands, they're then told, actually, what you did is meaningless. So here's a new set of demands. I mean, it's like a hamster.
There's no new set of demands.
It's like a hamster.
Let me tell you what. Let me tell you what.
That will be told, if you run fast enough, you'll get out of the cage.
No. The bottom line is that Israel would like a Palestinian Sadat. It wants the Palestinians. Listen.
This is really a worst case scenario.
Okay, let me just because they shot Sadat. But anyhow, the Israelis want the Palestinians. Israelis want the Palestinians to actually accept the legitimacy of the state of Israel and the Zionist project, and then live side by side with them in two states. That's what the Israelis. I don't even know if that's true today.
And what is the formal position of this Israeli government?
No, I'm saying I don't know if it exists.
Okay, its predecessor. Come on.
That's what Israelis want. They want a change of psyche among the Palestinians. And if that doesn't happen, there won't be a Palestinian state.
Mouin has an interesting point
because
I know you want to forget it, just like you want to forget the genocide charge. I know you want to forget that.
Well, the Palestinians want to forget it too, but it doesn't suit them as well.
But here's the problem, and it's exactly the problem that
Palestinians want to what? Forget what?
I know you want to forget that.
Well, the Palestinians want to forget it too, but it doesn't suit them as well.
But here's the problem.
The Palestinians want to forget it too. That doesn't suit them as well. That doesn't even make sense. Dude, that's such a bad... Oh, God, he's not even like... Or is he just saying that as in like the Palestinians want to forget it because it's like too hard for them to comprehend or contend with? Is that what he's trying to say? Because like it doesn't make any fucking sense. Not even a gotcha. I think he's just like shit slinging at this point.
Problem. And it's exactly the problem that Mouin just brought up. Now, I read carefully your book, One State, Two States. With all due respect, absolutely a disgrace. Coming from you.
Most reviewers didn't agree with you, though.
Yeah. Coming from you was like you wrote it in your sleep. It's nothing compared to what you wrote before. I don't know why.
That's so fucking awesome. An absolute disgrace.
You did it. In my opinion, you ruined your reputation. Not totally, but you undermined it with that book. But let's get to the issue that Mouin wrote. Here's what you said. You said, formally, you said, yes, it's true. The Palestinians recognize Israel. But then you said, viscerally, in their...
So what's up? Like... I thought Destiny at least like read Benny Morris's book or the Wikipedia summaries. Why is he constantly at odds with a lot of the information that he has presented?
Hearts.
They don't.
They didn't really recognize Israel. So I thought to myself, how does Professor Morris know? No, what's in the hearts of Palestinians? I don't know. I was surprised as a historian you would be talking about what's lurking in the hearts of Palestinians. But then you said something which was really interesting. You said, even if in their hearts they accepted Israel, you said, quote, rationally, they could never accept Israel because they got nothing. They had this beautiful Palestine, and now they're reduced to just a few parcels of land.
So they will never accept it.
So yes, so you said there's no way they can accept it.
I would say that as well.
Yeah,
the two states as proposed doesn't make any sense.
Exactly as Mouin said, you keep moving the goalposts until we reach the point where we realize, according to Benny Morris, there can't be a solution. So why don't you just say that outright? Why don't you say it outright? According to you, the Palestinians can never be reasonable. Because according to you,
they want all of Palestine.
According to you, they couldn't possibly agree to a two-state settlement because it's such a lousy settlement. That's what you said. But you said rationally they couldn't accept it, not their feelings.
It's both.
You said rational. You went from formally, viscerally, rationally. So now we're reaching the point where, according to Benny Morris, the Palestinians can't be reasonable because reasonably they have to reject two states.
They want all of Palestine.
Mouin is absolutely correct. There's no way to resolve the problem according to your logic.
Palestine. He said that himself. He said they should dismantle Israel. That's what he said.
What I said.
You didn't say that.
What I said, and I've written.
I'm glad you didn't deny it.
I've written extensively on this issue on why a two-state settlement is still feasible, and I came out in support of that proposition. Perhaps in my heart, you can see that I was just bullshitting, but that's what I actually wrote. That was a number of years ago, and just
yeah, I forgot that there's literally a Palestinian dude sitting across from him too, where he's like the heart of the Palestinian. The Palestinian mind says one thing, but the heart of the Palestinian is one of a marauder. it thinks a different one. It beats a different way.
Just a matter of historical record.
Hey, Blaze.
Beginning in the early 1970s, there was fierce debate within the Palestinian national movement about whether to accept or reject. And there were three schools of thought. There was one that would accept nothing less than the total liberation of Palestine. There was a second that accepted what was called the establishment of a fighting national authority on Palestinian soil, which they saw as a springboard for the total liberation of Palestine. And there was a third school that believed that under current dynamics and so on, that they should go for a two-state settlement. And our friend and correspondent, Wouter Loerse, has written a very perceptive article on when the PLO, already in 1976, came out in open support of a two-state resolution at the Security Council. PLO accepted it. Israel, of course, rejected it. But the resolution didn't pass because the US and the UK vetoed it. It was both of them.
I think it was 9-5.
Okay, yeah. But the fact of the matter is that the PLO came to accept a two-state settlement. Why they did it, I think, is irrelevant. And subsequently, the PLO acted on the basis of seeking to achieve a two-state settlement. The reason I think,
yeah, when the Palestinians accept a two-state solution, they're doing it to garner support from the international community, and it's bad. They're doing it for a nefarious reason. When the Palestinians actually take up violent resistance against the apartheid regime, they're once again doing it in a bad way, and they shouldn't do it. At a certain point, you have to realize, like, nothing the Palestinians can do is actually allowed for you, because for your genocidal ethno-state to exist as a project and exist in practice, okay, you can't have Palestinians exist there. There's no way that Palestinians can actually perfectly resist Israel's apartheid. Like, and by the way, they can't even perfectly resist it by dying, because then Zionists say, well, they're dying for Pallywood. They're dying for the Western world to look at and sympathize with their position. There is no way, like, the perfect solution to this literally is for the Palestinians to magically and quietly perish from the land. Like, just disappear. Israel kills them and still paints them as actually willing participants in the slaughter that are dying deliberately. Hamas is putting them in the direction of our missiles.
Norm, you've written about this. The reason that Arafat was so insistent on getting the minimally acceptable terms for a two-state settlement at Camp David and afterwards.
Is that a real take? What the fuck? My favorite is when someone first finds out like a Hasbara point, like a Hasbara talking point for the first time. When it doesn't come from the mouth of Jake Tapper as though it's like factually accurate, it definitely hits a little different. Yes, Israelis, literally Zionists, okay, will regularly reach that depth of humanity, inhumanity, sorry. No, not photogenic dead babies, telegenically dead babies. That is what Benjamin Netanyahu said in 2018. Telegenically dead children. That was the term he used. Anyway, I'm going to run the 3-minute ad break. No fucking segue. I don't give a shit.
Was precisely because he knew that once he signed, that was all the Palestinians were going to get. If his intention had been, you know, I'm not accepting Israel, I simply want a springboard, he would have accepted a Palestinian state in Jericho. But he didn't. He insisted.
That's something I've never understood. He should have logically accepted the springboard and then from there launched his next stage.
He
should have done that.
International law would put a real constraint on him.
No, but
once he accepted, it was over.
Constitutionally, he was incapable of signing.
Well,
I don't know that. You're right that he should have accepted it.
But if you're correct, okay, that he was really out to eliminate Israel, then he wouldn't have cared about the borders. He wouldn't have cared about what the thing said about refugees. He would have gotten a sovereign state and used that to achieve that purpose. But I think it was precisely because he recognized that he was not negotiating for a springboard. He was negotiating permanent status, that he was such a stickler.
By the way, he said that on CNN. They want to pile up as many civilian dead as they can. They use telegenically dead Palestinians for their cause. They want the more dead, the better. Like, that is a shocking, shockingly inhumane thing to say. That was in 2018. Or no, it was before then. It was 2014. I thought it was during the Great March of Return. He said something similar he said something similar then too. 2014 is after the first siege. Or not the first siege, but one of the sieges. Joseph Goebbels, November 16, 1941, essay in Das Reich, addressing German sympathy for German Jews forced to wear yellow stars. The Jews gradually are having to depend more and more on themselves and having recently found a new trick. They knew the good-natured German Michael in us, always ready to shed sentimental tears for the injustice done to them. One suddenly has the impression that the Berlin Jewish population consists only of little babies whose childish helplessness might move us, or else fragile old ladies. The Jews send out their pitiable. They may confuse some harmless souls for a while. But not us. We know exactly what the situation is.
About the details. The second,
just as a factual matter, he wasn't such a stickler. When they asked him how many refugees, the numbers...
It was a principle rather than the numbers.
principle.
He said I would be pragmatic about it.
Yes, and the numbers that were used at Annapolis were between 100 and 250,000 refugees over 10 years. That was the number. Arafat, when he was asked at Camp David, he kept saying, I care about the Lebanese, the Palestinian refugees in Lebanon, which came to about 300,000, which was a large concession from, whether you accept the number or not, that he wasn't talking about 6 million. He was talking about between 100 and 250,000 over 10 years. Now, the best offer that came from the Palestinians...
Yeah, this is very important to also understand because it shows the conciliatory tone and the concessions made by the Palestinian side, where Arafat, time and time again, very publicly declared throughout the peace process that they would concede to Israel's demographic concerns. These are key words to pay attention to. This means that they recognize that Israel as an apartheid state wanted to exist as a demographic majority Jewish state. So the right to return to Palestinian territory would factor the apartheid regime's own demographic interests as its maintenance of an ethno-state. And even that was beyond the pale.
The best offer that came from Israel was the Olmert offer.
Can we just pretend like we didn't all lay out the exceptionally pessimistic view of a two-state solution? Let's pretend that in 5 years, in 10 years, a two-state peace settlement is reached. And as historians, you'll still be here and writing about it 20 years from now. How would it have happened?
I think that historically, I think that the big issue is, I think that both sides have had their own internal motivations to fight because they feel like they have something to gain from it. But I think as time has gone on, unfortunately, the record proves that the Palestinian side is delusional. The longer that the conflict endures, the worse position they'll be in. But for some reason, they've never had a leader that convinced them of that as much. That Arafat thought that if he held on, there was always a better deal around the corner. Abbas is more concerned with trying to maintain any legitimacy amongst Palestinians.
I like that we're just avoiding exactly the references to historical fact that both Rabbani and Finkelstein just made. I'm conveniently jumping over that point to simply say the exact opposite occurred. Will my perspective actually have any quotes? Any historical facts? No. Pure conjecture, purely made up. It is devoid, utterly and entirely, of any kind of historical basis.
Than actually trying to negotiate anything realistic with Israel, that Palestinians are always incentivized to feel like as long as they keep fighting, either the international community is going to save them with the 5 millionth UN resolution condemning whatever, that another ICJ advisory opinion is finally going to lead to the expulsion of 500,000 Jews from the West Bank, or that some other international body, the ICJ and the genocide tribe, is going to come and save the Palestinians. As long as they, in their mind...
I like that he's saying that 400,000 or 750,000 Jews are not going to be forcibly displaced from the West Bank. But 2 million Palestinians in Gaza, well, they can get the smoke. This is what happens when you engage in post hoc rationalizations after you have made up your mind about Israel having a right to do a genocide, which you refuse to recognize is genocide any longer. You did recognize that it was genocide, and then you realized that people were yelling at you for that point, so you decided to go, actually, it's not a genocide, lol. This argument is completely, the only thing this argument presents is just confidence falsely placed upon your own intellect. There's nothing else here. He just simply is saying, no, actually, and repeating over and over again, no, actually, Palestinians never conceded. Finkelstein and Rabbani show clear points of concession from the Palestinian side and detail it and literally mention as to why even those concessions were not listened to, even though those concessions were ridiculous to begin with. Like, they were above and beyond, those concessions were above and beyond what is normally expected of humans or any kind of envoy that speaks for an entire population. And his retaliation simply was, no, actually. And also, there's no way that, 750,000 Israelis are going to be forcibly relocated off the West Bank. Okay. So what do you do with the 5 million Palestinians living in the territories that Israel is slowly carving out? Is it not an even greater act of inhumanity to forcibly continue to expel them?
Feel like somebody is coming to save them, then they feel like they're going to have the ability to get something better in the future. But the reality is all of the good partners for peace that the Palestinians have completely and utterly abandoned them. Egypt, Jordan, the Gulf states, whether you're talking bilateral peace or the Abraham Accords, most of the Arab leaders in negotiating peace with Israel have just not had as much of an interest in maintaining the rights and the representations of what the Palestinian people want. And the only people they have today to draw legitimacy from or to have on their side to argue with them are people that, I guess, write books or tweet, or people in the international community.
Once again, saying that there's no one advocating for the Palestinian cause in the region, which is, of course, due to American intervention and involvement that made it so, neutering any kind of allegiance that Palestinians would have. There is one kind of allegiance that the Palestinian population has from a regional actor. That regional actor is Iran. So I guess maybe they're not left out to dry in the way that he is suggesting. They're also, you have Hezbollah in Lebanon, you have Iran in the region, and you have Yemen. But of course, those guys are also bad because there is, once again, no way, there is no way that you will concede to the humanity of the Palestinians. If you do not see them as humans and you see them as simply a nuisance, all of your argument is going to revolve around this. That's it. Yeah, whenever someone advocates for Palestinians, they are conveniently called terrorists. Even in the United States of America, there is now a majority. There's now a majority that is advocating for Palestinians, but it's falling on deaf ears. So, of course, he can conveniently ignore all of that. Just like the majority, the overwhelming majority of Arab citizens living in those very same Abraham Accord states, for example, in the MENA region and in the Gulf states, that are advocating for the livelihoods of the Palestinians, and yet it's still falling on deaf ears because our governments, whether they are directly authoritarian, a monarchy, or even this theoretical democracy that we have in the United States of America, do not listen to the wishes of the people. There are plenty of people that are advocating for the well-being of the Palestinians. The Palestinians are not abandoned. Okay? It simply doesn't matter because there is no real democracy, just like there is no real human rights, which Benny Morris at least, says nobody gives a shit about international law. Destiny tries to claim he cares about international law while simultaneously hand-waving it away and also claiming that it is an impossibility to advocate for the Palestinians, and every single person has actually stopped advocating for Palestinians. Well, yeah, okay. So what are they to do? How can they defend themselves? Do you not think that they have an honest and reasonable claim to say, stop killing us, to stop forcing us to exist under this brutal colonial apartheid regime? I think it's a perfectly just thing to say. I think it's perfectly moral for them to not only advocate for their emancipation, but to rise up in arms against it.
That do resolutions or Amnesty International reports. And the reality is we can scream until we're blue in the face on these things. None of it has gotten any closer to helping the Palestinians in any sense of the word. The condition.
Yeah, this is like fake posturing, like, oh, I really do care about the Palestinians, but no one is like actually interested. But it doesn't make any sense when the guy saying it is like openly talking about Arabs as like dogs and has openly stated that he thinks the genocide of the Palestinian population is actually perfectly well within the rights of Israel, which simultaneously he denies Israel is doing. But if they were doing the genocide, it would be just. Which, by the way, for the record, is exactly what the fucking Nazis say about the Holocaust. They, one, deny the Holocaust ever even happened, but then they will very quickly say, but if it did, it was good, and it should have been done even harder. This is just pure fascist bullshit.
Has only gotten worse. The settlements only continue to expand. The military operations are only going to get more brutal. The blockade is going to continue to have worse effects. As long as we use international law as the basis, and there isn't a strong, a Sadat-like Palestinian leader that's willing to come up and confront Israel with the brave, peaceful negotiations to force them to acquiesce, nothing is going to happen. And I think that the issue you come up with is, whether it's people like Norm that talk about how brave the October 7th attacks were, how much respect they have for those fighters, Israel, in a way, and I think people have said as much about Netanyahu, the right wants violence from the Palestinians because it always gives them a perpetual excuse to further the conflict. Well, we have to go in October 7th, we've got to remove Hamas. Well, we can't trust these people in the West. We have to do the night raids because, the second intifada, it made us feel like the Palestinian people didn't want trust with us. I feel like the biggest thing that would force Israel to change its path would be a real, not for like 2 weeks, but an actual peaceful Palestinian leader, somebody committed to peace that is able to apply those standards and hold the entire region of Palestine.
Yeah, except there was one, and Israel used his meaningful concessions that both Finkelstein and Rabbani correctly and accurately described. Israel used those concessions as though it was nothing. Israel used the peace process as though Israel used the peace process as a mechanism to consistently get Western cover and Western support for settlement expansion in the West Bank. A fact that every Palestinian saw with their own two fucking eyes, impossible to avoid. And you also personally go back and forth on whether those concessions existed at all. He keeps saying there were no concessions made. We need a real peace partner. And it's like they show exactly why there was a real peace partner in Palestine on the Palestinian front, to which he conveniently does not address at all and moves on and just keeps saying, no, there is no fucking peace partner on the Palestinian side, and there should be. This is not a way to argue. You're just simply going, no, I don't agree with you. They keep bringing historical facts, okay? He is just not doing that at all and keeps saying, no, that didn't happen.
Palestine to those standards, because I think over time, the mounting pressure from without the international community and the mounting pressure from within, because Israel hosts a lot of its own criticism. If we talk about Bet Salem, like Israel will host a lot of its own criticism. I think that pressure would force Israel towards an actual peace agreement, but it's never going to come through violence. Historically, it hasn't. And in the modern day, violence has just hurt the Palestinians more and more.
If you paint a picture of the future, now is a good moment for both Palestine and Israel to get new leadership. Netanyahu's on the way out. Hamas possibly is on the way out. Who should rise to the top such that a peaceful settlement can be reached?
The problem is, like Benny said, it's difficult because Hamas enjoys so much widespread support amongst the Palestinians.
Yeah, all of this argument reduces to there's no apartheid because I don't think so. There's no genocide because I do not think so. And pointing out the flaws of the Israeli government makes me less likely to agree with you, so be nicer. Absolutely. Ridiculous.
People. I think that I don't know. There's opinions on whether democracy or pushing them towards elections was the right or wrong idea. But with like an Islamic fundamentalist government for Hamas, I don't know if a negotiation with Israel ever happens there. And then when the international.
Yeah, by the way, Israel doesn't have a Jewish fundamentalist government right now. Itamar Ben-Gvir and Smotrich are perfectly fine and well within their rights to have the opinions that they hold. But Hamas, that's the real scary Islamist fundamentalist governance. Ridiculous. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like the real both-sidist approach. Look, I will say this much. If Destiny actually wasn't so fucking intellectually lazy and living in a world where like everyone is constantly fucking hyping him up, so he just like legitimately started believing the shit that people were saying about how brilliant he is, he would at least do his due diligence and argue the liberal Zionist position. He would say things along the lines of, to make himself seem like he is that make himself seem like he's morally consistent. He would do what Chuck Schumer is doing yesterday. Okay? No, it is lazy. It's not laziness. He's farming controversy. No, absolutely not. It's intellectually fucking lazy. You can still farm controversy by defending a genocidal apartheid regime, but you can do a better job of arguing on that front by simply stating things like, well, actually, both sides do have some issues with fundamentalism. To move the conversation away from apartheid and genocide, if you want to do that correctly, you need to frame it as, well, you know, this is a religious conflict. And, you know, I don't like the Netanyahu government either. I actually don't agree with Smotrich. I actually don't agree with Ben-Gvir. And there are plenty of people in Israel that don't either. And this was a coalition that the corrupt Netanyahu government put together. These are the ways that you would have to frame it if you weren't intellectually lazy and a fucking charlatan, to be like, and yes, while concessions were made, you would pull up Rabin as like this incredible beacon of hope that genuinely was interested in defending the statehood of the Palestinians and whatnot. Will you stop teaching people on how to be fucking assholes? No, this is called steel manning. And that's precisely what I'm doing right now to demonstrate that I understand the other side's argument better than this fucking clown ass could ever comprehend it. At least Benny, to a certain degree, is trying to do that. Meanwhile, Destiny just keeps repeating Hasbara talking points that are completely, like, they come across completely idiotic because he's not even addressing any of the points that Finkelstein or Rabbani are bringing to the fucking table. That's it. That's a massive problem. He's not engaging with anything. He's just repeating the lines over and over and over again. He's literally turned into the talking point machine that he used to intellectually dismantle through logic and reasoning. That's it. That's all he's doing. What are Hoscore talking points you keep talking about? What? Hoscore talking points? The fuck?
Pressure is always, 67 borders, infinite right of return for refugees, and
Oh, I said Hasbara. It's just the Israeli word for propaganda. Or, sorry, what is it? Retelling of the truth or something? To convince? Hasbara is not Hoscore.
total withdrawal of Israel from all these lands to even start negotiations. I just don't see realistically, on the Palestinian side, no negotiations are ever going to start in a place that Israel's willing to accept.
If you want to dismiss international law, that's fine. But then you have to do it consistently.
Yeah, it just means to explain, sorry, but
you can't set standards for the Palestinians, but reject applying those standards to Israel. If we're going to have the law of the jungle, then we can all be beasts, and not only some of us. And I think, so it's either that, or you have certain agreed standards that are intended to regulate our conduct, all of our conduct, not just some of us.
Well,
so that's a fundamental
saying to abandon.
Well, you're saying, international law and the millionth UN resolution, you're being very dismissive about all these things. And that's fine, but then you have to be dismissive across the board.
That was a Chapter 6 resolution. That's non-binding. But 242
is binding.
What is,
of course it's
absolutely
binding.
not.
What is binding? Do you know anything about how the UN system
binding,
works?
if you read the language of the resolution, binding is typically if it commits you to upholding a particular international law or if it establishes a new law.
You just throw out words. You hear binding,
does
not
242
binding.
even does 242 mention a Palestinian state?
No,
Norm.
Of course
that's
not.
part of the problem.
That was the reason why the Palestinians didn't want to recognize 242 because it only referred at the very end.
Sure,
to
but the PLO recognized
problem.
181 and 242.
Yeah, but hold on. Every United Nations Security Council resolution, irrespective of under which chapter it was adopted, is by definition binding. Binding not only.
yeah, why would they? What the fuck? What are resolutions then? They're just throwing it out, dude. They're just fucking saying things. They're just talking shit. That's why they're doing it. There's no legal basis for any fucking UN resolution if you don't consider it to be binding. And if you don't consider it to be binding, then yes, you and Rabbani's assessment is correct. You're very callously saying that they're just words and it's not important. It's ridiculous. Why would you even bring it up then? Then you're basically reaffirming the position that Benny Morris had, which is that nobody actually follows international law.
On the members of the security.
Unless it suits my argument, as I'm trying to uphold the Palestinian resistance groups to some of the minutia of international law in an effort to justify Israel's, forward-facing, offensive, genocidal campaign.
Security Council, but on every member state of the UN. Read the UN Charter. It's black and white.
Sure, people
okay.
Can look that
now
up
regarding
but
yes,
the language even of 242 is kept intentionally vague, such that it doesn't actually provide again the final contours.
It's actually not that vague because the term "land for peace" originates in 242.
Sure,
the
but
idea
the part
is
about territorial acquisition and Israel's need to give it up was kept vague.
Okay,
that's why in 79 Israel thought that they fulfilled their obligations under 242 in terms of withdraw.
Allow me points of information.
Yeah.
The first principle in UN Resolution 242 is that the inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by force.
Which is meaningless.
It may be meaningless to you, Mr.
It was
Burnell.
meaningless to everyone in the region.
Mr. Burnell, that principle was adopted by the Friendly Nations Resolution, the UN General Assembly in 1970. That resolution was then reiterated in the International Court of Justice ruling advisory opinion in 2004. That was the basis of the coalition against Iraq when it acquired Kuwait and then declared it a province of Kuwait.
Yep, which Arafat supported.
That's what's called. That's
true.
Arafat did support.
Arafat did support.
That's why it's a shitty deal with the Oslo
It's not
Accords.
accurate. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there.
It's not accurate that Arafat endorsed.
Okay, I'm not going to go there.
Okay.
It's called under international.
No, it is actually irrelevant to the point of Israel. The fuck?
Law, use Kogan's or peremptory norms of international law, the inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by war. That is not controversial. It's not vague. You couldn't put it more succinctly. You cannot acquire territory by force under international law.
On the West Bank before 67. Who owned the Gaza Strip before 67?
Mr. Burnell, don't change the subject. If you don't know what you're talking about, at least have the humility. You talk about
how close is 242 got?
Oh, Mr. Bernelli, have some humility. I am trying to reason with you, Mr. Bernelli. Mr. Bonicelli, I'm trying so hard. Bringing your child to work day is never a good idea in retrospect. Yeah. They even brought out the iPad for him too, so he could just like busy himself, you know? So that he could just like be preoccupied while the adults were talking, and now he's bored of the iPad games, so he's just...
No. That is...
67. Who owned the Gaza Strip before 67?
Mr. Burnell, don't change the subject. If you don't know what you're talking about, at least have the humility. You talk about chapter 6. You don't know
how close has 242 gotten to the Palestinians to peace?
From tweet 5. You have no idea what you're talking about. It's just so embarrassing. At least have some humility. Between us, we've read maybe 10,000 books on the topic, and you've read 2 Wikipedia entries, and you start talking about chapter 6. Do you know what chapter 7 is?
Answer me.
Do you know what chapter 7 is?
Answer me a question. How close has 242 gotten the Palestinians to a state?
How
close has the 2004 advisory opinion gotten the...
He's 100% so cooked, so cumstered, and so dumpstered that, like, he literally is just going back to like, well, you know, it hasn't worked. Yeah, dumbass. If it had fucking worked, we wouldn't be having this conversation. This is the fundamental flaw in arguing from a liberal position that is completely empty, completely devoid of morality. Okay? He's getting mogged. Yeah. He's getting butt mogged by Norm Finkelstein. This is the issue. The issue is the moment that he's like, the moment that his intellectual rigor is called into question, he immediately has to resort back to like, well, it didn't work. Here's the problem. And this is reactionary thinking, okay? This is reactionary thinking. This is the problem with reactionary thinking, which is that what do Republicans do all the time? What do conservatives in American politics and American domestic politics always do? They point to the inability of change as a reason as to why things can't get better and mustn't get better. They'll always say, oh, well, what about the homeless veterans when talking about immigration? They only talk about mental health and only talk about healthcare and access to mental health care when talking about it as a misdirection away from gun violence. Okay? You are not actually interested in addressing the issue head on. You are deflecting away from it. And that's precisely why he turned around and went from talking about what is in 242 all the way to, well, it didn't work. You just jumped multiple points over to a position that everybody understands. The entire reason why this debate is happening is because UN resolutions don't fucking, haven't actually brought about change, haven't actually brought about peace. Everybody there understands this. You can't just like point to that. The only people that will consider you to be a brilliant intellectual person are people who are too stupid. Are people who are too stupid to recognize that like every single person in that room does understand that point. That is not even that you're not bringing up like a counter. Yeah, it is the Ouroboros self-fulfilling prophecy. It is not an argument.
The West Bank settlement.
What's your alternative?
The alternative is not this, whatever this making money off the conflict is. The actual alternative.
Yeah, and then he's saying, he's ascribing a nefarious purpose. He immediately hits the, you're actually grifting. I'm not grifting for assuming the position that is infinitely more favorable, okay, for money. A position that I didn't even put a lot of thought or effort into, okay? You must be grifting, though. Pure projection, another fucking point for griftonomics, another point for reactionary debating. I love that Mike and I talked about this earlier because he's hitting the full Monty here. He's hitting all the talking points, making an assertion that the other side of the issue is being argued not because one of them is a literal fucking Palestinian, okay, and the other person is unironically dedicated his whole life to documenting these atrocities and has suffered great financial blows. He's been blacklisted from academia for calling out Alan Dershowitz, a tenured Harvard professor, for plagiarism. It is ridiculous to act like there is any sort of like comparison. There's any sort of moneyed interest at play when talking about the Palestinian side of the argument versus the Israeli side of the argument. You got AIPAC, you got J Street, you got Democratic Majority for Israel. It is fucking ridiculous. There is no Palestinian equivalent. What a laughable concept to say that one of the most unpopular things to say that is true for literally decades, that Norm Finkelstein has advocated for because of his stubbornness and his endless pursuit to actually truthfully address the issue on hand. Yeah, Christians United for Israel is even larger than AIPAC. That's another, dude, so many. Christian evangelical Zionist groups are unironically infinitely larger than any Jewish-backed Zionist lobby, okay? So much larger. Christian Zionists, pound for pound, well, not per capita, but Christian Zionists actually give significantly more money to Israel than American Jews do, okay? A lot more of them out there, obviously. So you are right about that. They are also at the forefront of settlement expansion as well. So it is such a ridiculous fucking assertion to make. And it is one, yeah, they're calling Norm a grifter, which is psychotic. Like, if anything, listen, you might disagree with the way that Norm conducts himself. You might disagree with some of his contemporary analysis as it pertains to identity politics. I certainly do. But you can never call him a fucking grifter. This dude is honest to a fault. Even his enemies in academia don't go there. But of course, the person that's going to drop that, especially as it pertains to the issue of Palestinian advocacy, as though there is money to be fucking made advocating for the Palestinians who have nothing, is so laughable as you sit there and defend the genocidal apartheid regime of Israel and are not even doing a good job at it.
The actual
Destiny
alternative
should talk about making money off
your
of
media blitz, where
idiocy.
you go and talk to 50 million different people about
your
your...
early-
Yeah. Notice how the conversation, every single time this dumb fuck opens his mouth, devolves into nothingness. It's just shit slinging. Norm does a fair bit of ad hominems as well, okay? But at least his ad hominems come after direct assessment of historical facts. I don't think Destiny brought a single fucking factually accurate point to the conversation that at least Benny Morris had not presented before him. Not one. It's all pure personal opinion, devoid of any sort of factual analysis, devoid of even a significant counter to any of the historic truths that Finkelstein and Rabbani expertly delivered. Not a single retort was made. Not even an attempt at a decent retort was made. It is crazy. I've been walking around the house calling my wife Mr. Borelli all day. So really, it's that Steve isn't engaging with Finkelstein in any good way rather than the other way around. Stevie isn't engaging with Finkelstein's argument. Yeah, no, I've been watching this. We're watching for 4 hours and 20 minutes, and I haven't seen a single fucking instance where, like, Rabbani or Finkelstein brings up a point. I won't say this about Benny Morris. Benny Morris does address some of the points that they make. Obviously, I disagree with his opinion, but at least he's offering them the dignity of responding to the points that they're making. Destiny does not do this once. Not once. All he does is basically rephrase Benny Morris's argument in a worse way. In a more confident way, certainly, where he has this like position of unearned authority, despite the fact that it is very obvious for anyone who knows even a little bit about the history of the conflict, or at least like, you don't even need to know the history of the conflict. Like, if you have eyes and ears and a heart and you saw what has happened since October 7, it's pretty easy for you to recognize that, like, when Destiny says things like, oh, the genocide is not happening, there's no ethnic cleansing, or whatever the fuck, if you've even like paid a little bit of attention to what's going on since October 7, you unironically would be like, what the fuck is this guy saying? Oh. I at first I said you need to have someone that is devoid of like real historical facts in their argumentation to be able to defend Israel adequately. I actually take that back. A liberal Zionist, any professional liberal Zionist would have done a better job than Destiny. Destiny is basically doing the Rabbi Shmuley technique of yelling, flailing his arms, and consistently just staying on message, repeating talking points devoid of any sort of facts with no retorts to the arguments presented by Finkelstein or Rabbani. It's pretty crazy. He doesn't go as far as Rabbi Shmuley does at times, but that doesn't change the reality that like his arguments are so hollow. He is completely out of his element, so out of depth.
Awesome
But he
solution,
has
right?
a point there.
The issue is you have
All
to
these
negotiate.
resolutions have gotten the Palestinians no
Nothing.
closer
Yeah,
but hold on
to
a
a
second.
state.
Because they
You're-
haven't
you're
been
earlier-
enforced because of the U.S. veto.
They're not going to be enforced.
Well,
They've got
okay.
nowhere.
If I may,
you know,
Not gonna enforce the ICJ
you know
doesn't even have an
what?
enforcement
You know what,
mechanism.
Professor
We're
Morris?
talking about the case for genocide.
Professor Morris, because of your logic, and I'm not disputing it, that's why October 7th happened.
Oh my God.
Because there
I mean, he's right.
Hospital? I mean, has Israel like full on bombed a hospital? I don't think they have. Which what?
El Shifa.
Oh, that's the one from like 3 months ago, right?
Yeah.
Let me make a note of that. Besides Al Shifa,
Is chat going, oh no. No way, Lamau. Game of Thrones. Oh no. Yeah, by the way, Israel has not stopped blowing up hospitals since then, before then, after then. Oh man. I did have Mark on. I didn't even know he was like supposed to be debating Destiny afterwards or before. I don't even know when they debated. But I think his chat believes Al Shifa wasn't bombed by Israel, so they're saying Game of Thrones, the mark.
Shifa, have they bombed any hospitals?
I mean,
He didn't remember. No, bro, they're making fun of him. They did not bomb at Omegalol to my knowledge.
I mean,
Game of Thrones debate lost. Kaya, no. Don't even think about that. He debated beforehand and said you were his political nemesis. That's so sad, bro. Oh. My arch nemesis. Ay, ay, ay. He could try the paternalistic argument in that Israel is the most legitimate authority because it's the most developed economically. Mr. Botticelli strikes me as lazy and unimaginative. Yes, as someone who has like carefully combed through pretty much every fucking line of argumentation on the Israeli side, who has maybe near Norm Finkelstein levels of autism when it comes to simply just the talking points, nothing beyond that, okay? I can tell you that there are infinitely better ways to argue on behalf of Israel here. And considering that this is supposed to go out to a, by and large, like apolitical audience of centrists who are trying to arrive at the truth, to the fucking marketplace of ideas where interlocutors are being bested by better arguments, he absolutely could have fucking brought to the table, a better argument by assuming the liberal Zionist talking points rather than the most like insane ones. Being like, oh man, there's no genocide.
was no options left for those people. exactly what
And
Moeen
now what
said.
options are left?
Uh,
After
you know,
October
This has
7th,
been the
I-
Palestinian
what's-
mentality for
what's-
60
what's
years.
the
The
options
only
left?
option is
listen,
conflict.
listen to this.
The only option is
Mr.
combat.
Cornell is now an expert on Palestinian
Hold on.
mentality.
You're
You know about-
contradicting yourself.
I only
Palestinian
deal in
mentality
facts.
as
I
you
only
know
deal
about
in
chapter
facts.
But you're
5.
Egypt didn't find it
Tell me about
necessary.
chapter 5.
Egypt
Tell
didn't
me
find
about
it
chapter
necessary
5.
to negotiate
But you're
peace with the
hold on a
Palestinians.
second.
Jordan didn't find it necessary to
Hey,
negotiate peace with the
if I
Palestinians. The
may,
Abraham Accords
you're
didn't
co-
include
you're
the
contradicting-
Palestinians.
Fuck faster,
Despite all of
faster,
the international law.
Everybody, move
Wait,
in.
you're contradicting yourself. On the one hand, you're saying all the Palestinians do is fight and violence and terrorism and all the rest of it.
My go.
But on the other hand, you're saying they're expecting salvation from UN resolutions and international court. Those aren't violent.
No, but
they're-
it's part of maintaining.
law.
It's the continual putting off of negotiating
They've
any
neg-
solution.
they've
I think he said
negotiated.
19
As in when Arafat
I
takes
think he
10
said
days to
19
respond.
I
When
think he
Arafat takes
said-
10 days to respond.
Oh, dude, Arafat had to take 10 days to respond, so I think it's okay. Never mind.
I think
Hasan and Jen
Moeen-
all over the
I think
world to go
Moeen
and visit
said-
friends. Yes.
I think
But
Moeen
Moeen
putting the
said
conflict off
they
indefinitely.
accepted 2 states in 1975. Brace
They did.
Why
yourself.
didn't they accept the
they
Taba
did.
Summit
Brace
then?
yourself.
No, this
That's
is-
50
this is-
years ago.
this is a
That's
legend.
a half century
There's
ago.
a
No,
very-
no, they
there's
didn't
a ver-
accept the two-state
He
solution.
quoted
Just
a
a moment,
very good
please.
article.
There's-
He's
You
quite
can quote
right.
Arafat talking about how he's lying and he's just going to use in 94 and in 95 when he's making trips around the world, how he
there's
just
a
wanted to
very
use this as the
rich-
starting
Fuck
ground.
faster.
I'm
Fuck
sorry, I can
faster.
talk slow. You can watch YouTube video and
There's
slow
a
it down to
very-
0.5 speed if you don't understand what I'm saying.
Let me.
Faster.
There's a very lengthy history of Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. You want to deny that those negotiations took place?
Where it feels like there was a good
What
faith
feels
effort,
like.
where there was a good faith
Feels
effort,
like.
where it was a good
We
faith
have a
effort.
written record.
With all due
We
respect,
have
Yeah. It just, guys, everybody stop talking. Destiny doesn't feel like a good faith effort was initiated by the Palestinian side. So it doesn't really matter when he has no answer to the many concessions that Arafat made. That doesn't matter because he doesn't feel like there was a good faith negotiation happening. He doesn't feel that way. Guys, who cares about what history says? This guy who thought Recep Tayyip Erdogan was the motherfucking president of Syria or the president of Israel like 3 weeks ago. That guy doesn't feel like after he read some of the Wikipedia pages specifically to draw up like what he thinks is a good narrative and good talking points, he doesn't feel like that. But remember, he only argues in facts. Here's a fact. He couldn't find Israel on a map. He had already at that point decided that Israel should do a genocide and the Palestinians should just be genocided quietly. But he couldn't factually point to Israel on the map. You know, but he knows now. He's read up. And he doesn't feel like the Palestinians made a good faith
He
effort.
must be a fucking
You don't know
loser. I don't know who Francisco Franco is, but he must be a fucking
You
loser.
don't know Francisco Franco?
He's got $2 supporters.
Bruh.
$2 supporters.
يخدمون القضية
Bashar al-Assad, is that this guy?
الفلسطينية وإن القضية الفلسطينية
No.
هي الأولى عندهم.
Fuck, wait, who is this? Who are these people? Fuck, am I just supposed to know?
It'd be nice if you did, since, you know, you're fucking talking about it as though you are the authority on the subject matter.
وإن القضية الفلسطينية هي الأولى
This isn't him.
عندهم.
Oh, Erdogan.
القدس هي هدف.
Is it Erdogan? Erdogan? I don't know what the fuck to pronounce this guy's name. When did he become president of Israel?
Or Yahweh.
Were the Gospels originally written in Greek?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not Arabic or whatever, or?
No, they were written in Koine Greek.
What was the
yes.
Jewish fucking old shit?
Well, Hebrew, and
Hebrew,
there was
yeah.
some Aramaic in the Old Testament as well.
Okay, Aramaic, gotcha.
Yeah, but mostly.
He's also much nicer to these fucking Nazis, like seemingly, than he is to Norm Finkelstein somehow. He's the Ian Miles Chong of Palestine. He's kind of scared to have such strong and frightening opinions without knowing the basics. It's not. It's actually very profitable, it seems, especially if you have the confidence of stupidity backing you. and an army of dick riders who position you as the foremost authority. Yeah, imagine knowing less than Nazis about history. You didn't know who fucking Franco was. Actually embarrassing Lamau is right.
Mostly Hebrew. Yeah.
Okay, I'll take it. All right, okay. Not too bad. Not too bad. Dude, Europe? Bro, I don't even know half the countries in Europe. Okay.
Why don't you point out what Steven says that's wrong? I did. I very clearly detailed exactly his line of argumentation and why it's wrong. Because Finkelstein and Rabbani brought up clear concessions from the Arafat team multiple times. He did not address a single point that they made and simply just washed over it and said, no, there were no concessions because it doesn't feel like there are any good concessions that he gave. Now I'm moving beyond his feelings and showing you why his feelings are relatively unimportant in the matter, because who gives a fuck what his feelings are on the situation? They're addressing historical facts. But beyond that, his feelings extra don't matter in this circumstance because he's also devoid of like the factual basis to develop feelings on the issue. He's just feeling from the outside. Unless we're just going to debate on, like, we're going to have actual fucking academics on to talk about your own personal feelings. It's like, yeah, sorry, dude. I don't feel like the Palestinians actually did something. I don't think the Palestinians actually did a real, justified concession here. At least he could have done, the least he could have done is, like, address some of the talking points, right? If you're going to talk about how the Palestinians offered zero concessions, he could have just talked about like how unreasonable those concessions were, for example. Of course, your channel runs only on the Israel-Palestine conflict. Yes, dude. Yes, it does. Do you have an issue with that? I think it's one of the most important geopolitical issues. It is literally an ongoing genocide that the government that I pay taxes to is facilitating. I think that's pretty fucking important. I'm a nerd when it comes to the whole peace process. These knowledge are absolutely embarrassing. Months before negotiations started, Amos Malka, Shin Bet research head, told the cabinet Arafat couldn't accept less than 93% of the West Bank. That territory is the primary issue and the refugees was a leverage chip. Barak literally refused to accept that and replied, you think if I offered him 90%, he wouldn't accept? Nonsense. Something you said recently rings in my head now all the time. I live in constant self-doubt, and the arrogance and certainty of these people have without an inch of self-reflection pisses me off to no end. Yeah, 100%. Talking about your Twitter tabs? These literally watching right now talking about my Twitter tabs? Yeah, dude. I know. I got Twitter tabs, dude. You know, from actual fucking reputable journalists. Maybe instead of fucking reading Wikipedia to like browse for talking points as he gets like humiliated by guys whose actual work makes it into the Wikipedia pages, he would have a better understanding of the situation. You know what I mean? Keep coping though, buddy. Keep coping. I swear people still think you're smart. I promise. Yeah. When I look at Wikipedia, more often than not, I'm usually referencing the journals that are breaking stories. But hey, you've presented a comfortable narrative to your audience, hoping that they don't fucking watch, hoping that they don't actually make up their own conclusions. Okay? When I'm on stream and I'm looking at Twitter, okay, I'm looking at the actual journalists that are breaking stories on developing issues. I then also follow through and have those journalists on stream to interview them.
Denmark really owns this? That's so wild. Why? Honestly, I'm pro-genocide. Like, it sounds really shitty, but like, I think that Israel should just drop its fucking borders about where it is now, and basically Palestinians can go live in another place. That's really shitty, but like, that's about where I'm at.
With this whole thing, or
The light green is Palestina. Wait, what light green? Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong area. This is Turkey. Oh, here. Okay. Ugh.
Now, here's the issue, okay? If he hadn't drawn such serious, damning conclusions before learning about the issue, okay, then this wouldn't be as big as a problem. I have no problem with people that are not knowledgeable on the matter, okay? As long as they're willing to learn.
I don't know.
I'm tweeting. I'm going to say shocking that this dude got owned by one of the most well-read academics on. Shocking that this dude got owned by one of the most well-read academics on the issue of Palestine so hard his own debate partner started laughing at him. He rage quit his own stream.
I don't know who Francisco Franco is, but he must.
Damn, dude. Oh. Maybe next time he won't be so fucking careless as to place himself into a conversation amongst adults when he is very obviously out of his element. It is so odd. Of course his own fucking chat is laughing at him. That's the problem. Literally got owned by Candace Owens this past week. I haven't watched that, and I will not watch that. I don't really fucking hand any W's to Candace Owens. Like,
have a written
Mr.
record,
Pop
Mr.
Historian,
Burrell.
you can't even read the written records. I don't know why you're referring to it.
Excuse
Okay?
me? I just said there are 15,000 pages on Annapolis.
And I'm sure you cherry-picked your favorite quotes
I
from
don't
all of
cherry
them,
pick.
okay? That's
Hey, at
great.
least-
dude, accusing Norm Finkelstein of cherry picking his favorite quotes is so funny when you're cherry picking Wikipedia summarizations. Like, what the fuck? There is a reason why there's a massive intellectual gap between you and him and Rabbani and Benny Morris as well. It's because you are completely out of your element. You're a kindergartner trying to play basketball with LeBron James. And as like LeBron James is fucking dunking on you, you keep going, well, actually, I'm still winning. As long as I maintain this facade, maybe my own fan base won't recognize how humiliated I look to like the average onlooker.
That's
Mr.
great.
Burrell, at
Yeah.
least I had a quote to cherry
That's
pick.
great.
All you
Finkelstein.
have
And
is
I can,
Wikipedia.
do you want me, I gave you
all
quotes.
you
I
have
can give
is
you,
Even fucking Benny's laughing at him.
what, do you want
Wikipedia.
quotes? Find me the information
I
that shows
think-
the Palestinian cause has been furthered by any international
think the
law. You
prob-
can't do it.
I think the
Yeah, he keeps going, the Palestinian cause has never been furthered by international law. Okay, what is that? If not just like a complete fucking dismantling of international law, in which case it's bedlam. In which case it's might is right. If your politics is reduced to might is right.
Problem is different. Okay, you want to
You just ruined the critical skills of 10,000 young teenagers by calling citations cherry picking. Yeah, like ridiculous.
Say
you may be too young to sit at the adult table, but you still aren't sitting at the kids table. That's a pretty good own, my friend. I know my limitations. If presented the opportunity to sit alongside Norm Finkelstein on a subject matter this dense, would probably have, I know I would have the decency to say, I think there should be a Rashid Khalidi or Rabbani who takes this place because they are significantly more knowledgeable on the matter. After all, everything I'm saying, I've learned from them. That's the difference. Because I do actually care about the issue. And I want the issue to be presented as best as possible by knowledgeable people who can clearly communicate the historic record. Because I'm not in it just for the fucking drama of it all. And I don't think a lot of people get that. I'm telling you right now, like, I genuinely don't believe a lot of people understand that this isn't just like some fucking charlatan back and forth. This is not like a show. There are very real human beings dying every fucking day. Okay? Yeah, I'll go on Piers Morgan. I'll go on BBC. But if we're talking about like presenting someone like myself as like the foremost authority, especially in front of someone like Benny Morris, who at least is a reputable academic, regardless of the fact that there are inconsistencies in what his output is and what his actual research suggests, right? Like, I don't think that it is appropriate for someone like myself to sit there. And here is why. You're seeing it. This is what happens when you are deluded into thinking that you are actually presenting good arguments on the Israeli side. And you've just fucking deluded yourself through Dunning-Kruger and a fucking massive, well, not really massive, but a relatively decent but very passionate fan base of sycophants propping you up as this like intellectual giant, especially after you've owned like really dumb people in the red pill side of the world, which those guys are really fucking stupid. You know what I mean? That's not like, yeah, you can own those guys who are presenting arguments such as you should be able to beat up your wife. Of course, you're going to look like a fucking lion in front of those guys. But if you're talking about like actual fucking professors, academics, well-read people, people who are legitimately invested in this, people who have spent their entire lives writing the fucking books that end up in your Wikipedia summaries, you know what I mean? It's ridiculous. You're completely out of your element. You like, please have some common sense or at least a shred of decency to know when you are not supposed to be there. Yeah, debate Duncan on Trainwreck's podcast is a bit different than this. Exactly. He looked like a lion against you, to be fair. Yeah, you would only think that if you are, again, motivated entirely by shapes and colors and not the actual analysis, not the actual facts. And unfortunately, Destiny's audience has basically shown that time and time again. Time and time again. He had a bunch of people on his stream before, not just Mark Lamont Hill, that have shown clearly that he is wrong on facts that he is presenting. And yet his audience will be like, well, why didn't you bring that up during the debate? It's like, why are you so openly saying you don't give a fuck about the truth and you simply care about the aesthetics of that debate in that very moment? If you truly believe that debates are where truth comes out, then why do you bastardize that principle every step of the fucking way? Yeah, beating JonTron, not the intellectual mountain.
The Palestinians were only fighting, and then when I point out they've also gone to the court and the UN and say, well, all they do then is these things, and you say they should be negotiating, and I demonstrate that there was a lengthy record of negotiations, said, yeah, but they didn't go in good faith. Again,
you got a chroma cloud by debating Shapiro? He didn't, though. That's the other part. I legitimately thought that he would do a better job, okay, of debating Ben Shapiro. I thought he would have the decency to literally present good arguments and fucking best Ben Shapiro. That is how he has presented himself this whole time. He's this like progressive champion. He just sat there and agreed while Ben also still bitched him out. Because the reality is Ben does have more experience. Ben does have more experience. They're both devoid of facts. They're both simply orators, but Ben has more experience in the field of just fucking being wormy.
Placing the hamster in the wheel and telling him if he runs fast enough, maybe one day he'll get out of the cage.
What was the best good
Okay,
faith
and
negotiations
please,
on the side of the...
He disagreed with Ben on almost anything because he wasn't screaming doesn't mean he won. Wait, what are you talking about? Ben fucking bitched him out on Israel. The fuck, and he did agree with Ben on Israel almost completely to a fucking T. D fans are not even consistent because in his debate, D doesn't even do anything that D is just coping on Twitter with points he didn't bring up in the debate.
Just finish. I think the fundamental problem here is not what the Palestinians have and haven't done. And it's perfectly legitimate to have a discussion about whether they could have been more effective. Of course they could have been more effective. Everyone could have always been more effective. The fundamental issue here is that Israel has never been prepared to concede the legitimacy of Palestinian national rights in the land of the former British Mandate of Palestine.
Then how do you explain Taba Summit? How do you explain the Camp
Barak
David?
and Olmert did.
How do you explain
accept
Olmert's
the
offer to Abbas?
legitimacy
Yeah.
of Palestinian demands? This is
well,
but they just didn't want to give the Palestinians all of Palestine. That's all.
No, all of Palestine.
All of Palestine.
You mean all of the occupied territories?
No.
You're talking about all of Palestine.
Well, wait, what is the occupied? What is the occupied territories?
The occupied territories.
Is that all of Israel?
The occupied territories are those territories that Israel occupied in June of 1967.
Palestinians often use that term to define the whole of Palestine,
Could you show me,
not just the West Bank.
Could you show me, Professor Morris, in all the negotiations, and all the accounts that have been written, can you show me one where the Palestinians in the negotiations, because that's what we were talking about, wanted all of Israel? The maximum...
They can't say that because the international community won't accept it.
So they didn't say it. They didn't ask for it.
No, the Hamas did.
Yeah.
The Hamas always said all of it.
Hamas only negotiated with Israel about prisoner exchanges.
Yeah, no, I know, but they represent a lot of the Palestinian people, you will agree.
The only place I saw pieces of Israel were the land swaps. And the land swaps accounted for about 2 to 5% of Israel. Nobody asked for all of Israel. What do you
mean? They asked for all of Israel in 48. They asked for all of Israel in 67.
Okay,
what do you think those
Brunel,
wars were about? You're not going to respond to anything I'm saying because you have no answer.
I'll respond to you.
That's correct.
Okay, Mr. Brunel. We were talking about the diplomatic negotiations beginning with 2001.
You can't pretend that the first ask for Israel was in diplomacy.
Okay.
It was through war.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Is the international law argument ever going to get the Palestinians closer to state? Is the Israeli state ever going to be dismantled? Do you think that's like realistic coming up ever in the next 20 years?
Again, I'm posing a question. And the question is, regardless of what's feasible or realistic today, the question I'm posing is, can you have peace in the Middle East with this militant, irrational, genocidal, apartheid state in power.
Hamas? I don't think so, no.
Okay. And the question I'm asking is, can you have peace with this regime, or does this regime and its institutions need to be dismantled, similar to what the examples I gave of Europe and Southern Africa?
How do you contend with the fact that most of the surrounding Arab states seem to agree that you can?
Yeah, you're correct. Several of them, most importantly Egypt, Jordan, have made their peace with Israel. I should add that Israel's conduct since then has placed these relations under strain. I had very little. I didn't take the reports of a Saudi-Israeli rapprochement particularly seriously before October 7th. The reason being that it was really a Saudi-Israeli-U.S. deal, which committed the U.S. To make certain commitments to Saudi Arabia that would probably never get through Congress.
Do you not consider the Egypt-Israeli peace deal legitimate then, since the United States made a great financial contribution to Egypt?
I don't think the question is whether that deal is legitimate or not. I think that deal exists, but the point is whether the core of this conflict is not between Israel and Egypt. The core of this conflict is between Israel and the Palestinian people. And the reason that Israel agreed to relinquish the occupied Egyptian Sinai, and the reason that Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty was signed in 1979 is because Israel in 1973
genocide of the Palestinians strikingly similar to the genocide of the Native Americans, but I guarantee you these opinions on two are pretty different. No. I think dude. I think he would, I suspect that he would probably defend that too. He's a genocide writer.
Recognized that its military superiority was ultimately no match for Egypt's determination to recover its occupied territories, and that there would come a point when Egypt would find a way to extract an unbearable price.
Maybe just the Israelis wanted peace.
Well, the Israelis
not
wanted,
just because they were afraid of what Egypt might do at some point.
If you're talking about the average Israeli citizen, I think that's a fair characterization. If you're talking about the Israeli leadership, I think they looked at it in more strategic terms. How do you remove the most powerful Arab military state
simple
from the
points.
equation?
What was the terms of that Egypt-Israel peace treaty? International law. Egypt demanded
Nobody cared about international law.
Allow me to finish.
I'm just right. When you got a standing military, at least like Israel will listen to you a little bit.
Every single inch.
Nobody talked about international law. Begin and Carter and Sadat talked about the reality.
No, Professor Morris, I know the record. They demanded, as you know, because you've written about it, they demanded every square inch, as you know. They demanded the oil fields be dismantled.
No, that's in the
airfields.
No, not dismantled. They wanted the oil fields.
And they wanted the settlements dismantled.
The
settlements, the oil fields, and the airfield. They demanded all three back. You can't have.
What do you mean back? The airfields weren't there when the Egyptians were there.
That's incorrect.
You're
incorrect. They built an airfield. The Israelis built an airfield in the occupied Sinai, and they wanted it back.
They didn't want it back. It wasn't theirs.
No, okay.
They wanted the territory in which the airfield Israel had built back.
The oil fields, the airfields, the settlements had to be dismantled.
Yes.
Begin said, "I don't want to be the first prime minister to dismantle a settlement," but he did. Why? Because of the law.
No, it was because of peace. It was normalization
of the law. The law had nothing to do with anything. It was a negotiation.
Okay, this argument does literally reduce to what I'm saying, which is the only time Israel ever listens to anyone, even a little bit, is if there is a standing military backing them. So, okay, I guess it's time for American troops to be fucking put inside of Tel Aviv. Like, what are we doing? You come across as like completely unhinged. Like, no peace process will ever work unless American troops forcibly make Israel concede. Is that what we're doing? Hasan is the one suggesting troops in Israel. I'm following the logical conclusion of the argument that they're presenting. If might is right is the only time Israel actually concedes the demands being made by other belligerents on the other side. Okay? If that's the only time they'll concede, and international law is completely meaningless because it doesn't have like military backing, then I guess the only way to stop Israel's genocide is by putting military action in display. He's saying the only time Israel ever reckons with other nation states or any other entity is when there's force.
Mr. Morris,
two
Mr.
states,
Mr.
each of which wanted certain
Palestinians
things.
wanted,
the law had nothing to do with
as
anything.
they said repeatedly in the negotiations.
You're not listening.
I know.
You're missing the whole point.
I've read the negotiations.
The law has nothing to do with anything.
There are two foreign relations of U.S. volumes on it.
Nobody cares about the law.
The Palestinians kept saying, we want
Forget the Palestinians, they weren't there.
Allow me to finish. The Palestinians kept saying, we want what Egypt got. We want what Egypt got.
Yeah.
Egypt got everything
but
back.
Nothing to do with the law.
Okay.
Nothing to do with
and number two, I'm not saying it's the whole picture, but as Foreign Minister Moshe Dayan said at the time, he said, if a car has 4 wheels and you remove 1 wheel, the car can't move. And for them, removing Egypt from the Arab front would then remove any Arab military threat to Israel. So Mouin was, no, the first part did. And that's what the Palestinians kept saying. We want what Egypt got from the settlement.
That's true. But forget international law.
And by the way,
nothing to do
one last thing, on a personal note. The quote about Sharm el-Sheikh without peace, okay. That's the only thing you ever cited from a book of mine.
I cited from your book?
Yes. I was absolutely shocked at your betrayal of your people. That was pure treason. It was
I apologize for that.
Yes.
I apologize.
Okay,
I apologize.
I accept.
All right. Well, let me try one.
I really do think that, regardless of the fact that Benny is also consistently saying, who gives a fuck about international law, forget about international law, which I think for the average person listening in is probably going to raise some alarm bells or maybe call into question who has the moral high ground here. If there was a second person backing Benny that was like a little bit better read, this could have been an even more productive conversation.
Once again, for the region and for just the entirety of humanity, what gives you hope? We just heard a lot of pessimistic, cynical takes. What gives you hope?
Don't like war. That's a good reason. That's hope. In other words, the fear of war, the disaster of war, should give people an impetus to try and seek peace.
When you look at people in Gaza, and people in the West Bank, people in Israel,
they should want
fundamentally they hate war.
Yes, I think so.
What gives you hope?
There is no hope. No, it's an extreme. No, I'm not happy to say that.
Of course you are.
It's a very bleak moment right now, because
that I agree with.
Israel believes it has to restore what it calls its deterrence capability. I think you've written about it, actually. I just realized. Israel has to restore its deterrence capability, and after the catastrophe of October 7th, restoring its deterrence capacity means this part you didn't write about, the annihilation of Gaza, and then moving on to the Hezbollah.
No.
So the Israelis
are dead set on restoring that deterrence capability. On the Arab side, and I know Mouin and I have disagreed on it, and we're allowed to disagree, I think the Arab side, the lesson they learned from October 7th is Israelis aren't as strong as we thought they were. And
that will be an unfortunate message if that's really what the Arabs come to believe.
And they think that there is a military option now. And I think that it's a zero-sum game at this point, and it's very, very bleak. And I'm not going to lie about that. Now, I will admit my predictive capacities are not perfect, are limited. Yes. But for the moment, it's a very bleak situation.
That I agree with.
And I don't see right now a way out.
This right here, what Norm is talking about, is the most important part of the conversation. He's absolutely correct. Here's why. If you have followed the peace process, or if you're even a little bit knowledgeable over the peace process, you recognize that one of the most important lessons that the Palestinian population learned through experiencing it was that peace negotiations with Israel that came with a shit ton of concessions led to more settlements in the West Bank and more brutal military occupation. And in that same time frame, a militancy. Ethan said this and y'all ate him alive? No. There's nothing to do with Ethan at all. Oh, God. I would love to hear Ethan and Norm talk. That would never happen, but listen to me. One very important lesson was learned when Israel had to leave Lebanon simultaneously while the peace process was leaving nothing on the table for the Palestinians to hold on to. And that was that a successful military counter like the one posed by Hezbollah in Lebanon, by other coalition forces, but specifically Hezbollah in Lebanon, actually produced tangible, positive results for the Lebanese people. That is directly responsible for Hamas legitimizing its position straight up. That was the day that Hamas was able to, in my opinion, calcify its existence. If you look at Hamas's rise in popularity over the years, and even the evolution of tactics, that Hamas adopted. And there are many issues along the way, like, in my opinion, switching from only military targets to actually Israeli civilians was a major tactical error, in my opinion. This came after the assassinations, well, not the assassinations, the mass shooting in the mosque. I think it was Al-Aqsa Mosque. That was when Hamas openly declared that Israeli civilians would also suffer penalties. That was a major error, in my opinion. Perhaps maybe an error that caused the Hebron one. I think it was. No, it wasn't. You're right. It wasn't Al-Aqsa. I think, yes, the Baruch Goldstein massacre. I think that was a major error and actually probably caused Hamas to not gain prominence and popularity for many years to come. And then, in my opinion, the Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon showed the Palestinian population that there is no way to make concessions with Israel that does not only lead to further death and destruction for the Palestinians. This is why I always say Israel is primarily responsible for the existence of Hamas. And it was very self-serving. It was another tactical error from the Israeli front. Benjamin Netanyahu is on the record saying that Hamas, because they are viewed as terrorists from the rest of the world to the Western world, they are much easier to deal with. Israel can always control how high the flames go. Not realizing that arrogance, that incompetence, and that arrogance, that hubris that you can only have if you start believing your own propaganda about how Palestinians are subhuman, okay, and barbaric and can't get their shit in order. Only then do you legitimately arrive at a situation like October 7. You don't take the necessary security precautions. You reshift your interest and your forces into the West Bank to further the oppression of the Palestinians in the West Bank because you want to satiate the bloodlust that Itamar Ben-Gvir has, right? You do all of that. You get very complacent. You start believing that, no, you can actually have an apartheid without incurring any cost to your population. I think Israel showed throughout that peace process that it needs violent resistance to come to the table. This was a horrible, horrible mistake. And obviously, Benjamin Netanyahu is not single-handedly responsible for this, but he certainly was a champion of it for many decades. That's it.
However, at the very minimum, permanent ceasefire and the inhuman and illegal blockade of Gaza and
why is it illegal? They were shooting rockets at Israel for 20 years.
Okay,
why is that illegal to blockade Gaza?
He thinks they're bottle rockets.
Why is it illegal? I'll tell you why.
You don't rocket your neighbor. You rocket your neighbor. Expect consequences.
I'll tell you why.
Expect consequences.
But that works both ways.
Yes,
I know, I expect that.
Professor
works
Morris,
both ways.
I'll tell you why.
Yo, that's crazy. He's saying, dude, Benny Morris is a really interesting guy because he literally is like, he's doing realpolitik with a terror cell that he believes is a terror cell. He's literally saying that, like, the Palestinian enterprise is comprised of, like, an eclectic band of marauders, his words, okay? And, like, it is a permanent situation of fuck around and find out, like, back and forth, and Israel is the one who's always showing might is right to the Palestinians. I don't think he would have this callous of an indifference to Palestinian actions if Palestinians had equal proportional standing militaries, or not even proportional standing militaries, but like better arms, as a matter of fact. Like every single thing he's mentioned so far leads me to believe that his conclusion is that like Israel only gets to do this stuff because they have a stronger military. I've never been more reaffirmed in my position that like our endless political cover for the genocidal state of Israel is profoundly impactful and gives Israel all of the fucking go-ahead to operate in the violent ways that it has.
Because every human rights, humanitarian, and UN organization in the world has said that the blockade
Nobody cares
is,
about amnesty.
is a form of collective punishment,
Nobody cares
which is
about amnesty.
illegal under international
Forget
law.
illegal. The word illegal
You think a blockade?
You don't understand the way the world works.
Yeah,
These things are irrelevant.
And you think confining, because that's the blockade.
Yes, you don't
confining.
There's no opposing force, so how are you wrong? Egypt was the example you needed. No, he already gave that example himself. He's basically saying that as long as there's like a real standing military that presents a threat to Israel, that Israel will actually engage in realpolitik and engage in a process of peace negotiations. Lebanon is another example of this with Hezbollah. Israel is basically a permanent destabilizing factor in the region that actually doesn't correspond to American state interests, in my opinion, if this is the attitude that they have. Like, everybody knows international law is a fucking joke, but like, you at least have to present the argument from the framework of international law. That's precisely the reason why they talk about human shields. Like, why the fuck would you talk about human shields if international law doesn't matter and it's might is right? Obviously, might is right is the primary framework that he's operating off of, but he still tries to present an argument towards international law. That's why he has to justify the Israeli atrocities in an effort to say it's not a genocide. That's why he fucking talked about the International Court of Justice and the decision, and even lied and made it seem like the International Court of Justice decision actually wasn't damning so far for there to be at least like enough evidence that Israel is demonstrating genocidal intent for the court case to continue. Like, if he didn't give a shit about international law, he would just say, suck my dick to the ICJ decision to continue the case. But obviously he does care. I'm talking about Benny Morris now. Benny Morris does care about international law. He cares about international law as far as the Western world cares about international law.
Finding 1 million children, combining
that's the choice of Hamas.
Combining
that's Hamas'
1 million
choice.
children in what the Economist called a human rubbish sheep.
The Economist supported Israel in this war and continues to support Israel.
What International Committee of the Red Cross called a sinking ship, what the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights called a toxic slum. You think
it is a slum? Of course it's a slum.
You think,
but it's caused by
under
the
international law. You think it's legitimate?
Forget the law.
Hey, I know you want to forget the law.
What about
it's the
morality?
one thing that
It's
what every Israeli fears the most.
What?
The law. As Zippy Livni said,
Oh, good God, holy moly.
Studied international law. I oppose international law. Of course you don't want to hear about the law.
It's got nothing to do with anything.
Okay, so here's the thing.
Yeah.
Then don't complain about October 7th. If you don't want to, if you want to say, forget about the law.
All I said was they acted like barbarians.
Then there is no...
Yo, that's kind of wild. Benny Morris is crazy, bro. He's literally just like, yeah, I don't give a fuck, dog. Israel got what it was coming. He's literally just, his indifference to the atrocities is crazy. Now he has no now he is demonstrating indifference at least, but like before he was like
international humanitarian law. There's no distinction between civilians and combatants.
There should be.
And so now you're doing what Moeen said. You're becoming very selective about the law. If you want to forget.
Oh, thank God they're actually doing what I was just saying. Yeah, they're parsing through his picking and choosing of international law, because if you truly didn't care about international law and you completely abandoned it and said that there's no basis for international law, and that was like a foundational principle that you have in this conversation, you would never bring up the human shields argument at all. You would simply say Israel is destroying Palestine because it can, which is the truth, by the way. You wouldn't have to fucking say like, oh, there's human shields and Hamas is hiding between the babies and that's why we have to kill the babies. You can't only apply international law when you see fit, even as a justification for Israel's genocidal actions, or when you're talking about Hamas's actions.
And about the law, Hamas had every right to do what it did. It had every right to do what it did, according to you, not to me, because you want to forget the law.
Do you still support the Houthis shooting random ships?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's a violation of international law, so you play the same game.
Absolutely. And were there a power during World War II who had the courage of the Houthis? Were there a power that had that kind of courage?
So courageous to be bombing merchant ships while tens of thousands of people die of actual starvation. Not the starvation that exists in the Gaza Strip where people...
He said actual starvation and not the starvation that exists in the Gaza Strip. And he threw up the air quotes. Dude, what a fucking immoral charlatan. Thank God Norm handed him his... Norm just fucking destroyed him. It is it gives me a little bit of solace to know he's flailing around, angrily fucking pacing his apartment, thinking about how hard he got bitch slapped. Okay? Intellectually bested. Because god damn, these are such incredibly inhumane things to say. This is straight Nazi bullshit during the Holocaust. Like Nazi propagandist bullshit. In air quotes, the fake famine in Gaza. Wow.
Before October 7th, don't die of starvation. Not the concentration camps of the Gaza.
What about starvation in Yemen? Don't they have something better to do?
That was the Houthis.
Yes, I know. Don't they have anything better to do?
And in 3 years, they lost 180,000 people.
Shouldn't they be...
Yeah, the starvation in Yemen caused by Saudi Arabia with American weapons. Hello? What do you mean? What about the fucking Houthis? The entirety of Yemen is united on the Palestinian cause because they fucking recognize that the genocide that they withstood from the Saudi and UAE coalition forces with American weapons is very similar to the genocide that the Palestinians are experiencing currently. That is wild. The people of Yemen have shown that they are united. Those who literally fought against the Houthis are now united in arms against Israel. That much they have openly stated. Why would you even talk about this? What the Houthis are trying to do in the Red Sea is unironically what America should be fucking doing. Obviously, when America implements a blockade, they don't need to resort to direct physical contact with any of the fucking merchant vessels because no merchant vessel will ever fucking pass through. America, however, only has that smoke for countries that don't deserve it. Countries that justifiably had their own revolutions, like in Cuba, a country where apparently, according to Destiny's mother, his family owned slaves in their plantation. Those are not my words. That's Destiny's mother on stream saying that. I don't know if it's real. It came across like a joke to me, I'll be honest with you, because why was she so callous when talking about her slaves, but her family slaves? But yeah. America only has embargo smoke for countries like Cuba for the crime of having a revolution against the dictatorship, the violent dictatorship of Batista that was aligned with our interests. That's crazy.
Somebody wants to know which part of Cuba we came from.
My grandfather's sugar plantation.
Yeah, with this, with the.
I know where we lived in Cuba, you would have enjoyed, because we lived, at least the last period of time that I remember, we lived on my grandfather's sugarcane plantation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember going out with I don't know if it's called a sickle, something or other, that you went, and I left there at 5 years in one day, so that had to be when I was 4.
Yeah.
You know,
I think I hope that it's not real. Still a weird thing to joke about, but if it is a joke at all. Anyway, that structure, that order of slavery was overthrown in the Cuban Revolution, and America punished Cuba for it by implementing an embargo, a blockade that it maintains to this day. Cuba has thrived in spite of said inhumane actions by the most powerful imperialist nation on the planet. Thrived, Lamau. All things considered, yes. Yes. Especially in comparison, when you're talking about a country that has been able to create a vaccine for lung cancer in spite of that embargo that I was talking about, especially when compared to all of the other surrounding nations. Yeah, they're doing fairly well, all things considered. This episode of The Straw Man brought to you by McDonald's. The twist is that it isn't a debate. If you subscribe to this brain rot, you're essentially reminding everyone that you're still brain dead. Copium? What? Anyway, the point is, the reason why I brought up the Cuban embargo is because America implements embargoes on countries, okay? Blockades on countries. That's what Yemen is trying to do with the limited tools at their disposal. If America actually was a follower of international rules and laws, there would be no need for anyone in Yemen to do such a thing. America would be doing it. Well, first, America would be restricting arms trades to Israel for its continued genocidal campaign. And if it didn't stop, then that would follow.
Feeding the
You know,
Yemenis.
60,000 Yemenis died in starvation.
Is that seriously your claim that they had slaves? Did she use the word plantation? You know you can have a plantation without slaves? Well, why did she do this whipping motion? Like, I thought she was just joking. Now you're making me think that she wasn't joking. Why did she say I went out with the whip and did the whipping motion? Was that also what? Was she just... She says she went out with a sickle? Oh, she was cutting crops in the sugar plantation? Oh, got it. It was just one of those plantations devoid of slaves. Got it. Okay. It was the woke DEI plantation. Yeah, no, it was, yeah. Yeah, it was one of those Batista plantations that didn't have slaves. It was like, yo, chill. For the record, I didn't even think personally that it was like real at all. I thought she was just fucking memeing. You know, maybe she was just like behaving like Destiny does and joke about like serious shit like that, you know? Anyway. Why did they have to leave it behind so suddenly? Yeah, I don't really care about this aspect of the conversation. I'm gonna be honest with you. That's why I was willing to say, "Hey, man, it's probably a joke." You know what I mean, and move on. I want to hope that it is. None of that actually has any factor in this conversation that we're currently having about Israel Palestine. You brought it up. You do care. Yeah, I was making a short quip about America's capabilities of implementing an embargo against our foreign adversaries. A lot of first timers chiming in right now. Anyway, much about Cuban history, but weren't slaves outlawed in the 1800s? Kind of dumb and racist to imply they had slaves. No, totally. Every single person that's asking that question, I really want to understand what your position is on the Uyghur concentration camps, work camps. Do you feel like they are classified as slaves, or do you think that's a totally separate thing? Because the reality is you can't have one and the other. Batista was a brutal dictator. And yes, they did have plantations with actual slaves in them. Regardless of what country actually abolished slavery at what year. Like, are you taking up, are you assuming a pro Batista stance here specifically to defend Destiny? This is a very confusing thing. Or did you read the Wikipedia where it said slavery was abolished, so the conditions of the newer kinds of slaves in the forms of indentured servitude was actually a little bit different? Spent 9 hours watching this, and I have to say, you sold yourself short. I think you actually belong on that table. No, I don't. I don't think so. I think that these are much more knowledgeable people.
Why fight the Western powers and Israel when you should be taking care of your problems at home, the Houthis?
Often, the only allies of the dispossessed are those who experience similar circumstances.
Don't you think that they should take care of the Yemen?
Yeah, I literally was joking. I wasn't joking. Sorry. I literally said, I think to be as charitable as possible, I thought his mom was joking. And those who wanted to defend Destiny went to the lengths to fucking literally start justifying slavery in practice in Cuba and also Batista. Very odd behavior. Very, very odd behavior, guys. I don't know what you're doing. You should have just kept it at me being like, oh, it's probably a joke, and moved on. Why the fuck are you guys doing that? That's odd, man.
Yemeni problems.
I'm very happy. I'm very happy they're helping out the Palestinians. Anyone who helps the people,
expense of the Yemenis.
Anybody who comes to the aid of those suffering a genocide, half of whom are children. Yeah, according to the most current UN reports, as of today, 1/4 of the population of Gaza
is starving.
That means 500,000 children
are starving,
are on the verge of famine.
They keep saying on the verge of.
On the verge of.
I have not seen one Palestinian die of starvation in these last 4 months.
Well,
not one.
There have
They're
been
always on the
documented
verge.
cases.
They're on the verge.
There have been documented cases.
I haven't seen it.
Yesterday, Al Jazeera said 6, and the day before that, they said 2. So those are the two.
That number.
How many people need to die of starvation before it's like a good number? What's the number? What's the number? What's the acceptable number of dying children of starvation? Like, this is not even now we're no longer just doing genocide denial. We're no longer just doing famine denial. You're just like directly denying every fucking organ of international authority that is openly stating that the situation in Palestine is fucking dire. There are Holocaust footage style videos of children with their fucking rib cages showing. Like literally 1-to-1 comparison at this point. That is insane. This is Nazi level atrocity denial. It's fucking terrifying. In response to this point, Norm, his assistant, posted a picture of a child dying in starvation on his Twitter account. Yeah, I saw that. What the fuck? That's fucking gross, man. That's actually so gross.
Number probably dies in Israel of starvation also.
I don't think there's famine in Israel.
There isn't. There isn't in the Gaza Strip either.
So laid back,
it's something
so
which is
blasé.
produced for the Western.
There are infants dying due to a engineered lack of access to food and nutrition.
I don't think it's engineered. I think if the Hamas stopped shooting, perhaps, or
Unfortunately,
as you said, engineered.
I think Amnesty, Human Rights Watch called it using starvation as a weapon. That's called engineering.
Okay.
That's what they did, but you were pushed on this by Coleman Hughes to bring up like an example of why is the Gaza Strip, like by what metric are they starving? By what metric is it so behind the rest of the world?
You know, if we're going to bring up
well, I want to hear an answer to that because you didn't answer it before.
I'm happy to answer it.
Yeah.
I just quoted you from the humanitarian organizations. They said 1/4 of the population of Gaza is now verging on famine.
Before October 7th.
Okay.
Before October 7th.
I'm not going before October 7th.
That's what you use that as justification for Hamas fighting. You say the conditions were unlivable. They had to fight.
I said to him.
So my question is, what made it unlivable prior to October 7th? What are the metrics?
Okay, here's one metric. Israel literally denied pasta into fucking Gaza. Pasta. Like the blockade was rigorous. The blockade was incredibly restrictive. The blockade was not just about ensuring that fucking weapons don't go into Gaza, but instead shit like pasta, chocolate. The Interior Ministry officials at the time called it counting calories, putting the Palestinians on a diet very openly. Israel set a caloric restriction upon the Palestinian population. Not only that, but also Palestinians don't have drinkable water. Israel controls almost all the water, all the salination plants. Israel basically virtually destroyed. The salination plants that currently exist need power that only comes in from Israel, by the way. 90% of the water in Gaza is undrinkable, unusable completely. This is before October 7. Kaya, place. Thank you for place. Good girl. It's for your own good, baby.
Supposed to be their natural allies have on occasion thrown at them. But this is a people that never has, and I believe never will surrender. And at a certain point, I think Israel and its leaders will have to come to the realization that by hook or by crook, these people are going to achieve their inalienable and legitimate national rights, and that is going to be a reality.
What do you mean by that? You mean all of Palestine? Is that what you mean?
No, and
from the river to the sea.
Well, ideally, of course, yes. And what
those are the inalienable rights.
No, what I was saying earlier, and then the discussion got sidetracked, is that I did believe that a two-state settlement, a partition of Palestine along the 1967 boundaries would have been a reasonable solution, because I think it also would have opened pathways to further.
But now you believe what?
Further nonviolent engagement between along the 1967 boundaries would have.
I've been watching the video for so long, it even fucking reset, let alone at the top of the hour when there's a 3-minute ad break too. If you no longer want to see those ads, all you need to do is subscribe for $5 or for free with the Twitch Prime, by the way. Here's the 3-minute ad break now.
Been a reasonable solution, because I think it also would have opened pathways to further.
But now you believe what?
Further nonviolent engagement between Israel and the Palestinians that could create other forms of coexistence in a federal or binational or
What do you think
other.
about refugees in regards to that? Do you think there has to be a resettlement of the 5 or 6 million, whoever wants to lay claim to being descendants of?
I think there has to be an explicit acknowledgement of a responsibility and
the return
and of their rights. I think that in the framework of a two-state settlement, I think a formula would need to be found that does not undermine the foundations of a two-state settlement. And I don't think it would be that difficult, because I suspect that there are probably large numbers of Palestinian refugees who, once their rights are acknowledged, will find it exceptionally distasteful, exceptionally distasteful to have to live among the kind of sentiments that we've heard around this table today. To be quite frank, I mean, I was previously unfamiliar with you, and I watched one of your preparation videos. Very disconcerting stuff, I have to say. You were explaining 2 days ago in the discussion about apartheid and how absurd it was, that in your view, Jim Crow was not apartheid. Jim Crow was not apartheid. But Arab states not giving citizenship to Palestinian refugees is apartheid.
Oh my God. It's so, God, his analysis, his depravity knows no bounds, okay? It literally only works if you just think, if your foundational principle here is that, like, no one else can do any wrong, white people on top, only Arabs bad. It's fucking nuts. Jesus Christ, dude.
That's what I meant with my earlier
position,
comments
that's fine,
about
that's
white
right.
supremacy.
So my issue, that's great, the white supremacy comment.
And if
well, hold on, let me respond,
Go
okay?
ahead.
My issue is that I feel like we have jumped on this euphemistic
progressive, by the way, straight up
treadmill, and I think that's part of the reason why this conflict will never get solved, is because on one end, you've got a people who are now convinced internationally that they're victims of apartheid, genocide, constant.
They're not convinced internationally, they're experiencing it. All you are doing is genocide denial. One day, I hope that we will look back at this and shudder, and we will have a hard time comprehending the inhumanity of the statements that this fucking asshole is making. This is insane. This is just straight up moral bankruptcy. And let me tell you, okay? Here, one thing I will tell you is this. Destiny gets his talking points or tries to position his moral compass around the Democratic Party, right? Sometimes he'll, take a more right-wing position on issues. Maybe sometimes takes a more left-wing position. Not entirely sure when he's done that recently. I don't really pay attention to much of what he says, except for the fact that I've just listened to this fucking asshole, forced to listen to this fucking asshole for 5 hours. What he doesn't know, because of his inexperience dealing with this, what he doesn't understand is that the Democratic Party's position is going to inevitably have to evolve on the matter, and he's going to look like a fucking indecent charlatan. Okay? Let me tell you something. Chuck Schumer today said Benjamin Netanyahu is bad, and what he's doing is bad. What he doesn't know is that this stuff, there's a reason why many Democratic Party leaders, no matter how loyal they are to Israel, don't go to these lengths that he's going to, because they're calculated political actors with many years. They know what it looks like when your statements are posterized in perpetuity. No licking. Dude, shut the fuck up about how long the coverage is. Oh my God, genocide is happening. Because of his inexperience in this field, he has positioned himself way, way outside of the scope of what Democrats would be comfortable saying, not realizing that these statements will haunt him. Okay? And I'm talking about it strictly on griftonomics terms. Okay? Because I do not think that a human being can be this depraved. Like, he thinks he's dick riding Israel to this degree and it will suit his purpose in the short term, not realizing that this is now a part of history, a part of his history. So when the Democratic Party inevitably shifts positions on Israel and says things like, oh my God, you know, maybe we went a little too far and it's actually all Benjamin Netanyahu's fault, he's going to be left in the fucking dark. He's going to be left outside of the boundaries of, you know, moral permissibility. He already is, because he is defending ethnic cleansing. He's betting on the country's right-wing turn. He said there was going to be a backlash to leftist progressivism for years. People are that depraved. 40% of Israelis want more genocide. Yeah, it doesn't matter. He's not living in Israel, okay? He's living in fucking America. Unless he does like a full-blown, full-tilt, right-wing, open fascist grift, these statements will haunt him. I mean, even if he does that, these statements will haunt him in perpetuity. But it's crazy. He's so horny to defend Israel on like certain conditions that he keeps saying things like fake famine. You only do this if you're inexperienced, okay? That's why you don't hear this level of animosity, this level of like openly stating that like things that you can see with your own two eyes actually are not real. They're surreal. They're made up by some grand narrative. Not if he's completely shameless, and he is. No. No. No shot. Yes, he is a bad person. It's not about what the Democratic Party says. It's about what drives engagement. You give him too much credit. He's morally and ideologically bankrupt. The mistake he made is he looked at Israelis and now he's using the rhetoric of an Israeli and not an American Hosbarist. Yeah. No, I think so. I think so too. Why is everyone here so biased? Bro, come on. We're biased against genocide. Like, what the fuck do you mean? Yeah, why won't we see the position like the fucking carefully documented malnutrition that the Palestinian children are currently experiencing? Why don't we just deny that? Like, that's your question here, okay? Like, why don't we deny what we see with our own two eyes? Why don't we deny what, like, every fucking liberal media network is basically presenting now? Very different than what they were saying on October 7. What you have to realize is this has been happening since October 7. A lot of people came in here and were like, oh, Hasan, you are going to get your comeuppance. Like, you are going to be proven wrong over and over again. And some people just simply never checked in ever again. They checked out. They never checked in ever again to see if, like, I was right. Okay? But the reason why I've been vindicated time and time again, and this is a really weird thing to say considering that my vindication comes at the price of Palestinian deaths, is because I am familiar with the ways in which Israel has operated for years. Many of you, on the other hand, have only hyper-focused on this conflict and learned about stuff, and you're playing catch-up. You're playing catch-up in the last quarter, not knowing what the next steps are going to look like. Because you don't know. And it's understandable that you don't know. So the point is, if you don't know, then the least you can do is just maybe try to learn.
concentration camp conditions, ethnic cleansing. They're forced to live in an open-air prison with all of these things that are stacked against them, all of these terms that are highly specific, that refer to very precise things. And then when people like you saying that they should...
nothing less from someone who doesn't think Jim Crow is apartheid.
I don't know if Jim...
But who does
because
think that Arab
because
states
the problem
not
is you're
giving
morally loading.
Palestinian-
For you, apartheid is when racists do bad things.
No,
right?
no. There's a definition of apartheid.
That's great. But
There's a very clear definition.
No, there is a... What the fuck? What? Dude, you can't do this. You're not talking to some fucking limp dick PUA red pill podcaster. Okay? Like, when you're talking to a serious journalist or a serious academic, you can't fucking put words in their mouth and be like, you just think apartheid is when racists do bad things. No, they don't think that. There's a very clear legal definition of what it is. And the people that came up with that very clear legal definition also think it fits the bill of Israel.
Top-down racial domination enacted through top-down, like federal legislative policies or whatever, means that I don't know if Jim Crow would have qualified for apartheid. That doesn't make it any less. Excuse me, Finkelstein. I'm talking right now. Excuse me, Finkelstein. I'm talking to your friend over here. I don't know if it would have qualified as the crime of apartheid. Just like if Israel were to literally nuke the Gaza Strip and kill 2 million people, I don't know if that would qualify for the crime of genocide.
In your eyes, probably not.
I don't. Well, yeah, but because genocide requires a special intent. I think the issue is intent.
Yeah, and for the record, that legal standard, according to the International Court of Justice, has been met to at least prosecute it, which is a pretty fucking high bar to clear. This is not something that people just dish out willy-nilly, okay?
Instead of, and I think this conversation actually is emblematic of the entire conversation. I don't think anything...
Let me finish answering...
Well, sure.
Did I just... Wait.
To literally nuke the Gaza Strip and kill 2 million people, I don't know if that would qualify for the crime of genocide.
In your eyes,
like if Israel were to literally nuke the Gaza Strip and kill 2 million people, I don't know if that would qualify for the crime of genocide.
In your eyes,
like if Israel were to literally nuke the Gaza Strip and kill 2 million people, I don't know if that would qualify for the crime of genocide.
In your eyes, probably not.
I don't...
I'm sorry, what?
To your friend over here, I don't know if it would have qualified as the crime of apartheid. Just like if Israel were to literally nuke the Gaza Strip and kill 2 million people, I don't know if that would qualify for the crime of genocide.
In your eyes, probably...
Bro, what? Come on, there's enough dick riders in here still watching, hate watching. Explain it. Explain it. Like, what is he saying? Is he saying that like genocide only happens if it's like through the mechanism of ovens? Like, what the fuck? So like the Yemen, the genocide in Yemen, not a real genocide. The genocide in Yemen, not a real genocide. The genocide of the Yazidi population, not a real genocide. Only 5,000. Who cares? ISIS on top. Like, is that what he's saying? Like, I don't get it. The Armenian genocide, not a real genocide. Is that his position here? Like, what the fuck is this take? That is an insane fucking approach. Like, what? Yeah, Rwanda, not real. None of these genocides are real because, you know, it's about what? Like, what people are using. I genuinely think Destiny only thinks genocide happens slowly over time. If I Thanos snapped one entire race out of existence, they all instantly to D that is not genocide. His worst take ever. He thinks you have to say, I am doing a genocide, otherwise it's not. Yeah, except Israel has said that. Like, that's the other problem here. So enough Israeli officials have said that, which is the entire basis for why there was almost near unanimous support in the International Court of Justice. That clip was all over Twitter.
Racial domination enacted through top-down, like federal legislative policies or whatever, means that I don't know if I don't know if Jim Crow would have qualified for
Have you
apartheid.
ever
That doesn't
heard
make
of
it any
Plessy
less.
versus
Excuse me,
Ferguson?
Finkelstein.
Have you
I'm
ever
talking
heard
right
of
now.
Plessy versus
Excuse me, Finkelstein. I'm talking to your friend over here. I don't know if it would have qualified as the crime of apartheid. Just like if Israel were to literally nuke the Gaza Strip and kill 2 million people, I don't know if that would qualify for the crime of
In
genocide.
your eyes, probably
Top-down racial domination enacted through top-down.
I think he's saying that genocide requires special intent to commit it. Yeah, which, by the way, Israel does have and is shown time and time again that they have that special intent. Guys, this unironic, his level of argumentation, his style of arguing here leads me to believe that the only thing that he doesn't agree with the Nazis on with respect to the Holocaust is that like I guess he didn't believe the things that Nazis believed about Jewish people, about like racial superiority. But he does believe that about Israel and its racial and religious superiority over the Palestinian population. Like, straight up. Everything he has said thus far leads me to this conclusion. Like, if he also believed what the Nazis were saying about the Jews, he's like, yeah, of course. Like, I mean, there's just cause here, you know? They're making good arguments. They're presenting good arguments to why they have to deal with the Jewish question. I generally think he wouldn't think the Holocaust wasn't a genocide if it happened in 5 months instead of 5 years, except like the final solution did happen in a very short period of time. I know that like the majority of deaths before then happened throughout that entire process, but like it was still greatly sped up. You know what I mean? It's like, but what if like Israel was doing like nuke maintenance and cleaning the console and shit, and then some dude accidentally pressed the button and the nuke coincidentally hits Gaza and kills 2 million Palestinians? Would that be a genocide? I think not. Yeah, like hypothetically.
Probably not.
I don't. Well, yeah, but because genocide requires a special intent. I think the issue is
and
intent.
Can you show the intent of Israel doing a genocide for hate watchers in the chat? Defense Minister Yoav Gallant saying we are fighting human animals and therefore we have to stop food, water, and all matter of aid going into Gaza. October 8th. Benjamin Netanyahu saying this is Amalek. And comparing a story within Judaism to what happened where they were completely exterminated. Any quote from Ben-Gvir, any quote from Smotrich, the entire ICJ court case lays out in no matter of uncertainty. There are no innocent civilians in Gaza. Herzog saying there are no innocent civilians in Gaza. And it's not just people in positions of power saying it. There's a direct through line from people in positions of power saying it all the way down to the soldiers on the ground repeating those exact terms, including Amalek.
Instead of, and I think this conversation actually is emblematic of the entire conversation. I don't think anything.
Then let me
I don't
finish
think,
answering
well,
Benny
sure, but you
Morris's
accused
question.
me of supporting racism. So yeah,
well,
I
you
think
did,
and
I
did it. Do you think I support Jim Crow laws?
Look, when
the fact that you can't even answer that honestly,
it doesn't
right?
matter
You
what.
say that 800 civilians were killed by Hamas. You said, well, maybe 400 were killed by Israel.
No,
I don't know the
didn't say
number.
that.
Maybe
No, I didn't say that.
He did not say that. He did not say that at all. You're just making shit up now. I like that he's upset about his own words being used against him in this conversation, and he's not even trying to like defend the position and immediately resorts back to, making up shit that like his opponents are saying that they did not say at all. How are you going to be this good? Why do people watch you? This chat is pointless. What the fuck? You will never see my comment. Why should I follow you? This isn't enjoyable. Like, as someone who wanted to start following me, this is not where I want to be. Okay, then fucking fuck off, dumbass. Jesus Christ. Go find another fucking community where in like a sea of 15,000 comments that the streamer actually gives you hope and listens to your fucking dumbass take. How stupid. Nobody's forcing you to be here.
You said 400.
No, I didn't
You
say
co-signed the opinion.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't.
Oh, well, wait. How many? What do you? I think the word was some. That's what I heard.
No,
well, you weren't listening.
How many people do you think approximately, if you had to ballpark it, how many do you think were killed by Hamas on October 7th?
I think it's pretty clear that the majority of civilians that were killed,
51% or 90%.
Don't ask me to put a number.
I just
on
want a ballpark.
something
Those
I
are two
don't
very
know.
different intuitions.
First of all, when you say Hamas, do you mean Palestinians or do you mean Hamas
I mean the
specifically?
invading Palestinian force. I don't like to say.
That's crazy. It's like, what's the percentage? Is it 51%? Is it 90%? Like, he's saying the majority of the civilians unconditionally, unquestionably was killed by Palestinian resistance forces. Of course, he's not going to give you a number because he doesn't fucking know. What the fuck? That's not his fault. That's actually no one's fault at this point. The forensic architecture and the analysis will take years. It will take years to fully parse through how many of the civilians that were murdered on October 7 were murdered in the hands of Israeli rocket fire, whether it be from helicopter gunships or whether it be from artillery from tanks in the kibbutzim. Okay? This doesn't change anything ultimately, because when you say that the majority of civilians were still unquestionably, undoubtedly killed by the Palestinian forces, you're recognizing the reality. What the fuck? It is simply trying to pick apart a semantic point to posture as though you have any kind of moral high ground in this conversation.
Say Palestinians because I don't think all Palestinian civilians were involved.
No.
In attacks. I'll say Hamas, Islamic
You
Jihad,
mean
whatever.
But that's how this discussion.
Whenever D is out of his depth, he turns to these irrational arguments where he can try to get you on quick answers. Yeah, this is what I like to call the clip show. He's playing to the audience that currently isn't live watching, right? He does this all the time, and then he will simply say, "Well, I'm just testing your moral boundaries." I've never forgotten this last-ditch effort that he applied on the he should be able to say the N-word in a vacuum argument that his fans still 5-6 years after the fact constantly fucking bring up. Well, they don't bring up how stupid his argument was, but they don't even bring the argument itself up, but simply state Hasan actually agreed with Destiny's position on white people being able to say the N-word. No one obviously believes them. Only the hug box believes that dumbassery. Okay? It's like, it's literally, oh, I'm just simply presenting you with some rapid fire questions to test out your moral boundaries. It's like, what if I were to say the N-word in the vacuum of space by myself? Would that be okay? That was his brilliant fucking five-head argument to why he should be able to say it.
Discussion started, you said Hamas, and I began to answer that. And then Benny Morris said, actually, he means Hamas in addition to jihad and the others. So
of the invading Palestinian force,
How many do you think killed civilians versus the IDF? What do you think of the ballpark, the percentage?
Well, the figures we have are that about a third of the casualties on October 7th were military.
That's
and
not
about
what I asked at
two-thirds
all.
were. What's your question?
How many? What percentage of civilians do you think were killed by the invading force?
I think a clear majority, but I can't give you a specific figure.
If you thought it was closer to 51% or 99% were killed by.
Why would he know that? How would he know
because
that?
it's interesting to actually stake out a position.
Yeah, it's interesting.
If you want to be.
It's not. It's not, because the overarching concession has been made because they are being truthful. They're honest. Kaya, no. They're being honest. Yeah. He's dude, listen. This is it. It's trying to intellectualize a gotcha moment that you're trying to create here. Okay? I'm trying to stake out your position. It's actually interesting to stake out your position. Why won't you just say a random number? Why won't you say a number that is random so that I can act like I have the moral high ground here? Completely irrelevant, by the way. 5 hours in, what the fuck does this argument do? They already said that it's the majority of civilians that were killed by Palestinian resistance.
Completely totally agnostic on it. That's
Based on
fine.
complete ignorance, because we don't know. Professor Morris doesn't know. Muin Rabbani
And yet you
doesn't
can
know.
speak with absolute certainty that the IDF is targeting and murdering Palestinian children.
Yes, because there's infinitely more evidence to that matter, both in genocidal intent. Shouts out to the Israeli authorities for being so welcoming and so open about their genocidal ambitions. And there's infinitely more evidence to the deliberate targeting, both historically in the way that Israel has applied the Dahiyya Doctrine, but also in this round of the siege, where they, according to the 972 magazine's investigation, have what they consider to be high priority targets. It's not an accident that 25,000 plus women and children have been ruthlessly slaughtered by Israeli forces in this incursion. Much, much higher number of civilian casualties in this incursion than any other prior siege. That's the problem. The problem is there is evidence for one. There's not enough evidence to make a clear-cut percentage number for the other. There's evidence for genocidal intent, and there's certainly evidence for indiscriminately bombing civilian targets that is so fucking broad-reaching. The impact of it is so broad-reaching that it comes across as indiscriminate.
Intentionally.
Oh, actually,
you see the double standard?
No, I don't. You see,
I know you don't.
I know,
It was a rhetorical question. Obviously,
you know
you don't.
why? Because
you're
I
uneducated on the
I
matter.
looked at the UN report. I looked at
the
UN
Goldstone report.
No, the UN report on the Great March of Return.
I know his ass knows the Goldstone report because, like, again, Hasbara, okay? Like, literally just hitting all the Hasbara talking about. It's like, anytime, if there's any gripe from a Zionist, like, they have told Destiny that this will be a good line. I know he has that loaded in the chamber. If Norm was bringing up the Goldstone report, which, by the way, there is a shit ton more, okay, UN reports than the Goldstone report, for the record. But he only brought that one up specifically because he knows that one, because he knows what the counter to that is. He's going to immediately be like, well, Goldstone actually went back on his assessment, even though the other parties involved in the report did not. And Goldstone was harassed endlessly for it. That straight up right there, the reason why he immediately fucking said the Goldstone report, which is from years prior, mind you, and irrelevant to at least this incursion. Yeah, Goldstone didn't even refute the main points of the UN, and the other authors stand by it. Exactly. But it doesn't matter. But that's a good gotcha to be like, haha, you brought out the Goldstone report. Well, did you know? I'll have you know that the same report that Goldstone himself said was like not good and not up to snuff. That is the reason why he brought that up. That's not what Norm is talking about at all. And the only reason why he would think Norm was talking about the Goldstone report, specifically in this incursion, in this instance, in this siege, is because he knows a good counter for it. He's trying to bait him into saying yes so that he can counter it and get a fucking clip off.
In 2018, and they said that the snipers were targeting children, medics, journalists, and disabled people.
Just as they are now in this conflict.
Exactly.
No, more journalists have been killed in the last several months in Gaza than in any other conflict.
And then in all of World War II. Then in all of World War II.
Hamas is not killing journalists in the Gaza
Do you
Strip.
agree that they
More-
operate in civilian uniforms? That their goal is to induce that confusion? That that's the way that they conduct themselves?
If he knew anything about international law, he'd know that a spontaneous militia is actually well within the bounds of international law, for the record. He says civilian uniforms. You know who actually violated international law? Israel, when they wore doctors' uniforms to enter a fucking hospital in the West Bank. Why the fuck would he ever bring this up? That's so dumb. Hamas being in a defensive posture against the occupying force is well within the grounds, well within their rights under international law to fight, not with like full-blown military gear, but with civilian garb.
Militarily?
Let me finish my point. More journalists
I understand.
have been more UN.
Children in
He doesn't want to hear it. So
No,
boring.
because it's
Fine.
virtue.
It's so
You're not having a material, a substantial.
signaling.
It is virtue signaling.
Yeah.
Yes, like when you say
I know.
children.
You can see when he's just saying random and wrong stuff when Benny's quiet and not defending him. Yeah.
And over and over again. That's virtue
talking
signaling.
about, talking about how many Israelis were killed. That's not virtue signaling, because that's human life.
I don't care about. I don't care if 100 are killed or 1,000.
You
I'm
just
curious who you're assigning blame to.
51%.
I'm curious who you're assigning. The question, yes,
and then
that's not the number. That's the responsibility norm.
And then Mouin mentions that more journalists were killed in Gaza than in all of World War II.
That doesn't further any part of the
more
conversation.
medics were killed.
No, that's
in Gaza.
that's silly.
And then
Journalists
he says it's
weren't
virtue
in
signaling.
the area.
But when Israelis get killed, that's serious.
I never said it's serious on both sides. I didn't say
He's like, I don't give a fuck about how many Israelis killed. I love death and murder. He's like, no, you don't understand. I don't care. He's just like, he doesn't care how many people die. What the fuck? It is wild that so in certain circles, like being a relentless sociopath, like a bloodless monster, is seen as like peak virtue. Not realizing that this isn't happening. This debate is not happening in a vacuum. It's not happening in his own fucking hug box. This debate is literally happening in front of millions of people. 1 million so far in one day. What is this? I would have shot her twice while simultaneously kneeling on George Floyd's neck for 90 minutes. What the fuck? Dude, blocking this fucking asshole was the greatest decision of my life, honestly. And it's been years. So much happier that I don't know all the unhinged shit that he tweets about.
Virtue
No, I'm not virtue signaling.
signaling.
I'm asking a substantive question of who do you assign blame to, or do you play into Norm Finkelstein's conspiracies that the ambulances should have known immediately who was dead, that the numbers were changed because they were fake, or that maybe 51% of the people were killed by Hamas and Islamic Jihad, but 49% were killed by IDF helicopters.
You asked me a direct question, and you got a direct answer.
I didn't. I got majority, which could be
I
anywhere
said
from
a clear,
51 to 99.
a clear majority.
What
were my
percent is a
exact
clear
words.
majority? As opposed
It's
to a
always, they
majority?
live in
A clear
ambiguity.
majority, in my view, is well over 50%. Please don't ask me to be more precise, because
You could say 80, 90, 95%.
I don't. If I knew that, I would.
This is such a dumb, dude. This is such a fucking dumb conversation. I'm sorry. We don't know. Not that it matters, because it is the majority, a clear majority. What the fuck? Like, it is irrelevant. You've already said that it is an atrocity. What the fuck? What are we doing here? Like, they're desperately trying to win points on this side of the table. On the other side of the table, they're like, look, I don't know what the actual numbers are. And we won't know for some time, but it's definitely a clear majority. Like, one side is trying to state factually accurate analysis. The other side is like, come on, but tell me what your suspicion is.
Say it.
I think it's a reasonable. It's a reasonable.
Perhaps it is, but
You're not the best person to be asking that question. You know, I read when you described Operation Defensive Shield, and you said a few dozen homes were destroyed.
You're talking about what happened in Jenin refugee camp.
And you said...
No, the Arabs said 500. You guys said 500 Palestinians were killed in Jenin.
I never said
and
that.
Then that was the statement of the PLO, the Palestinian Authority.
You said a few dozen
and that there were massacres there.
There were a few dozen
homes. Yes, a few dozen homes.
You guys, you're Arab. Your people. Come on. That's funny.
Yeah, well, it turned out 140 buildings were destroyed. 5,000 people were left homeless.
How many were killed?
5,000.
How many?
You described it. No, I'm talking about homes destroyed. So you're not the best person to be criticizing what Mouin says when he says clear majority, but he can't say more. You know why he can't say more?
He doesn't.
He doesn't know.
Yeah, I understand that.
I hold as a historian.
If I was trying to belittle, I would give you a very different answer. I would just say, I don't know. I do know that some were shot.
You know what the right phrase there would be? The overwhelming majority were killed by Arab gunmen. And very small number were killed by Israelis by accident or whatever.
You're not
That's probably
as a historian
true.
now.
That's probably true.
That may be. I can state with confidence a clear majority. Overwhelming majority, you may be correct, but I can't state that with certainty. I think there's a very easy way to find out is to have an independent.
Forget independent.
Exactly. Well, of course you forget independent.
Forget that doesn't mean anything.
Forget the law.
Independence.
Forget international law. Forget independent assessments. No, just take my word for it, big dog. What do you mean? What the fuck? Come on, Benny. The fuck are you doing? How are people going to take you seriously as a fucking academic if this is how you play fast and loose with like matters of historical record? Like what? He's like, listen, when it comes to scrutiny, I apply the utmost scrutiny to matters of historic record. When history is happening in front of me, however, I'm going to be like, who cares? Who cares? Fuck it. YOLO. He's saying, you know what it is? He's like, as a historian, it makes my job all the more sweet. After all, I am a new historian. If it wasn't for the early Zionists that muddied the waters about the actions of the Nakba, I would have never become an important figure in Israeli history. So win-win for me. I like when they muddy the waters so that I can do my job. I can do my job 10, 20 years, 30 years after the fact and keep actually investigating and uncovering truths. It's great. He's just basically thinking 3 steps ahead.
UN High Commission
for independent
human rights.
Not necessarily.
Just repeat
They're
the numbers.
all
just repeat
barbaric countries. You know, a Syrian was the head of the UN Commission for Human Rights.
But if it was an Israeli, it would have been okay.
Whoa, yo, brother, that's crazy. A Syrian was the head of the UN Commission for Human Rights, he said. Yo, this got way more unhinged. I feel like Lex was like, all right, we got to cut this down. We got to stop this shit. Bro, I feel like Destiny's relentless, unrestricted racism rubbed off on Benny a little bit. So much so that I wouldn't say that he wasn't, it's not like Benny wasn't racist before, wasn't not racist, or was anti-racist. Like he wasn't, right? But but I think Destiny gave him the confidence to speak his truth. He's like, I love that this segment is called Hope for the Future.
You know,
a Syrian was the head of the UN Commission for Human Rights.
but if it was an Israeli, it would have been okay.
He certainly would have been more honest than a
Of
Syrian.
course. Oh, yeah.
Bro! Wait, why is he not embarrassed to say that? Bro! Dude, what the fuck? Yo, look at Rabbani's face when he says that. I'm losing my mind. What the fuck? Yo, I swear to God, Israelis have zero chill. They think everyone agrees with them. Brother, in most of the other parts of the world, people at least like try to act like they are not this racist, okay? Bro, you are not on the alt account, Benny. Benny, this is your main. Benny, stop tweeting. Assyrian. Notorious liars. What the fuck?
From your perspective.
Well, to disagree with Steven, I thought this was extremely valuable. And at times, really, like the view of history, the passion. I'm really grateful that you would spend your really valuable time. And just one more question, since we have two historians here. Well, just briefly, from a history perspective, what do you hope your legacy as historians, Benny and Norm, will be of the work?
I think Benny's legacy, Benny, it's such a funny question to ask this to Benny, because on the one hand, you have a guy who is, they're both very controversial in different ways. You have one guy, Norm, very controversial, but very consistent, very principled. On the other hand, across the fucking table, sitting across from him, the guy who just said Assyrian is dishonest. It is in their nature, okay? The other guy who said that literally has spent most of his career shitting on his work and those who use his work. His legacy is forever going to be trying to fight against every other subsequent historian that came after him that utilized his words in the same exact way that Norm did in this fucking debate. Okay? Straight up. That's all he does. Hours upon hours and hours of words typed out specifically to be like, you guys are actually misunderstanding. Like, I was saying it's good that there was planned ethnic displacement. Please stop saying that there was planned ethnic displacement and it was bad. Say that there was planned ethnic displacement and it was good. It was for a higher cause. It was for a greater good. You guys misunderstood me. Please stop doing this. Now, of course, plenty of historians might have this take now. The problem is he was one of the first. So he is now in the halls of history, specifically Israeli history, alongside the likes of Ilan Pappé and Avi Shlaim as a new historian, because he was one of the first to get there. That's the funniest part about it. The funniest part about it is that his legacy has actually moved people in the right direction. Okay? I can't believe D1, what the fuck? Yeah, dude, totally. Hey guys, I'm definitely not a Destiny dick writer hopped up on copium that followed 16 minutes ago specifically so I could write this and then clip out the response that Hasan delivers me so I can get some upvotes on the subreddit. Okay? Yeah, he definitely won, dude. These motherfuckers need a pacifier, okay? Yeah, somehow I won. Exactly. I wasn't even there. I wasn't even a participant. Oh. Ay, ay, ay. Brother, he waited 10 minutes in chat just to say that? Yeah, it's very sad. You did get him to rage quit his stream 2 days in a row with your commentary? Yeah, I mean, just fucking mainlining cope. He's like Frank Herbert, who had to write 5 books to justify why Paul wasn't a good guy, but in his case, he's doing the opposite to justify genocide. Can we finish the last 3 minutes in case there's more memes? Yeah.
That you've put out there. Maybe Norm, you can go first and try to just say briefly.
I think there's a value to preserving the record. I'm not optimistic about where things are going to end up. There was a very nice book written by a woman named Helen Hunt Jackson.
Yeah. I never thought Destiny would somehow get cucked harder than that fucking clip that's like floating around Twitter that I saw, where like he's just sitting there like a little weasel in his fucking cuck chair as his now former wife is dancing with that dude. What is it? Abba and Preach. Like, I really didn't think that he would be in the cuck chair again, and here he is, prominently, in a worse position. This time, intellectually cucked. Just watching 3 dudes have a conversation as he has to sit there and just, like, take pot shots and, you know, talk about nuking Gaza.
At the end of the 19th century, describing what was done to the Native Americans. She called it a century of dishonor, and she described in vivid, poignant detail what was done to the Native Americans. Did it save them? No. Did it help them? Probably not. Did it preserve their memory? Yes, and I think there's a value to that. You know, there was a famous film by Sergei Eisenstein. It was either Battleship Potemkin or Mother. I can't remember which one. The last scene was the Tsar's troops mowing down all the Russian people. He pans the scene.
Not all the Russian people, just a few.
Yeah. Well, he pans the massacre. He pans the massacre.
But he could have killed a lot more.
And the last words of the movie were...
Good one. Dude, good one, dude. Fucking hey, he said he could have killed a lot more.
Proletarians, exclamation point, remember, exclamation point. And I've seen it as my life's work to preserve the memory and to remember. I didn't expect that anyone would read my book on Gaza. It's very dense. It gives me even a bit of a headache to read at least one of the chapters.
You wrote a book on Gaza.
And but I thought that the memory deserves to be preserved.
Amen.
Well, I would,
dude. Okay, suspicion here. I'm willing to bet if they were to talk about the USSR, I feel like Benny would agree 100p with Big Boy over here, and Destiny would be extra cucked. Like a lot of people don't know this, maybe, but a lot of people went from the USSR to Israel. A lot of Russians still immigrate into